We are now live. Over
Thank
to
you.
Chair.
Welcome back, everyone, to the afternoon portion of our work session on Tuesday, December 5th, 2023. We have an exciting set of topics before us this afternoon. And the first one, proposed framework for Drug Treatment and Recovery Act, Measure 110 reform. Take it away.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I'm Erin Doyle, your Senior Government Relations Manager. And while I am the only one sitting here right now, that is because I am standing on the shoulders of an immense amount of work that came from approximately half of the county at this point in preparing us for this conversation. I have saw information. I want to thank, first of all, the staff and directors of Health and Human Services, Community Corrections, Juvenile, and the Housing Department, as well as District Attorney Barton and former Sheriff Garrett for the literal hours they have put into helping make sure that the supporting memorandum and this presentation reflected numerous impacts to the county when it comes to talking about the Drug Treatment and Recovery Act. Also, the entire GR team has been focused on making sure we have adequate information and adequate input from our departments, as well as the ACAs who cover all of these departments. So it has been a monumental lift, and I just want to acknowledge and thank everyone for that, because it's a reflection of the work towards a one Washington County approach to complex and multifaceted issues. But I also want to just at the outset acknowledge that this conversation is going to be limited to the legislative process, and we are not going to be talking about any potential proposed or spoken about ballot measures that might be looking at the same issue. I just want to be clear that is not the role of your GR or staff to talk about those types of political issues. So just putting that on the record at the outset. So for today, we'll remember how a PowerPoint works. This is the agenda that I'm proposing for us to do, kind of going through why a policy framework, again, just to refresh memories, but why specifically for this topic, and then talk about really high level, the background on what the Drug Treatment and Recovery Act had on county services and what proposals there are that we're aware of that are out there related to reforming Measure 110. And then we proffered up some proposals that for your consideration, kind of as a straw man, as a starting place, but also as a reflection of the numerous conversations I've had, both within our service departments about what will get them their needs met, as well as the conversations I've had with some of you, either casually or more explicitly related to Measure 110. So just as a ground setting, the purpose of today is the start of that conversation. And it's to provide the background information, not just about what Measure 110's impacts to the county was, but potential reforms, as I just said, but also to get your guidance and direction about what our approach should be to how we handle this legislative conversation. So the policy question is, should we be drafting this framework? And if so, have we started in the right place and what's missing? So with that, a reminder of the purpose of a policy framework and just slides that are fun to look at. As stated before, when we were talking a couple of weeks ago about the potential for a transportation policy framework, a policy framework is a longer statement than we see in the agendas. It is how your GR team is recommending we take on these complex policy issues instead of trying to have one sentence to solve it all, is being really mindful and creating a policy that highlights the outcomes and what identifies success for your board, and therefore for the county, and what we need in order to move forward in a conversation with a legislator. In this particular instance, as we talk about the Drug Treatment and Recovery Act, we need it to be a one Washington County response, because if we don't speak with one voice across all of our departments, someone will be left behind and something won't be considered. So we want to be really mindful that when we touch this many departments and have that many impacts on the folks that they're servicing, we need to be mindful of that one Washington County approach. So why Measure 110? it was really hard to find a department that wasn't impacted. I think land use and transportation is the clearest example of a non-impacted service department of the county. But this conversation is coming to 2024's legislative session, whether we want them to or not. There is an interim joint committee that's has both senators and House members sitting on it, taking hours and hours and hours of testimony from all perspectives, and they are trying to put together their package. And in order for Washington County to have a voice in that, we need to have a policy framework that we can start from. And as I stated, we need to recognize what success looks like, but what the potential ramifications are if they just shift the burden back to us to do the work of whatever they decide the reform should be. So being mindful of what those fiscal impacts are, not just to the work that we're currently doing, but any changed work that comes out of the legislative process. So
I just say, as I read this slide, I found that I needed the reminder of when Measure 110 passed. So I looked at the elections information, and if I'm correct, it passed in November of 2020.
yes,
And so I sat back for a moment to think about what did we know about, what are they called? Controlled use substances.
controlled substances.
Yes, thank you. What did I know about drugs leading up to that? And what I understand now is happening all over our state, and how it impacts us. So I appreciate, I just wanted to offer up November of 2020. I'll leave it at that.
Well, if I could just add quickly, I think that's a good point, because November of 2020's landscape, even knowledge isn't as much the issue for me as it is the landscape is so dramatically different in 23. And I think that's an important piece here too.
Yeah, that is one of the things in talking with our partners at HHS. They, some of these substance use disorder is not new. There are many controlled substances and uncontrolled substances that we've been dealing with, but in 2020, the prevalence of fentanyl was very, very different, and the manufacturing of methamphetamines was also really different. And so we're seeing those crises moving forward, as well as try and see if I can stop that. Okay. But also looking at what is happening literally on our streets with homelessness and the housing crisis, as well as pandemic results. All of these things have kind of amounted to a very different landscape in 2023, and why I think that there is an urgency behind the legislators. The legislators are feeling an urgency to move in 2024. And some of that is encapsulated in the memo that accompanied the packet. So in looking at the roadmap of where we're going, we need to start at where we've been. So that's what we're going to start here with some background. But to be really clear, Measure 110 really focused on two things. It changed the crime of a personal possession of a controlled substance from a misdemeanor to a violation, which is a very different proceeding. It's a different set of consequences. It goes from you have to show up in court, can be arrested, placed in jail for pre-trial detention, to you have a ticket, show up, pay your fine. And the second thing it did is it redirected specific types of funding at the state level from the purposes that they serve now into funding for addiction treatment and recovery programs across the state. And those changes have impacted the county in a number of ways, and now they are subject to conversations about how to reform Measure 110. So to start with the impacts to the county, I first looked at the most basic, what are the revenue impacts? And the main thing that Measure 110 did is it reallocated the state marijuana tax revenues. So right now the state charges 17% on most of the transactions within the marijuana growth sale industry for recreational use. That 17% has been put into what is called the Oregon marijuana account. And then from there gets divvied out to do a number of things. First, pay the state's costs, and then portions come to local jurisdictional partners. The counties historically received statewide, we shared 10% of that account. And that was divvied out by formulas that are complicated and I won't get into. So these numbers reflect what Greg Munn in the finance department, another department that I forgot to thank at the beginning, dug these out of our revenue system to figure out how much money we have been making in the past and what the change has been as we've seen implementation of how the Oregon marijuana account has been changed. So what happened in Measure 110 is they capped the quarterly amount that stays in that account and then gets shared out to 11.25 million a quarter or $45 million a year. And then we get 10% of that $45 million every year, or we as counties writ large, sorry, not Washington County. Washington County then gets our formulaic distribution, which has gone down, I think, from the time marijuana became a recreational item. And it was very popular and we sold a lot of it to more stable marijuana market. And so you see those impacts to our general fund revenues, because that's the other thing that's really important is that marijuana revenues came to the county and you chose how to spend them. So when Measure 110 passed, that cap was put in place and everything above that cap gets put into a separate account that is then handed out through a competitive grant process. And the process by which that has been done has not been smooth, has not been simple for folks to get through. Everyone has feelings about whether or not they got enough. I will say that Washington County's Health and Human Services Department has been very competitive in how we have pulled in resources from that for this past biennium. I try to do math and every time I do it wrong. It's more than $7 million that have come to the county between our behavioral health and public health. Approximately 5 million of that goes to the CAT building and capital construction, and the rest is for programmatic and staffing purposes, including the work that HHS has done as a behavioral health regional network coordinator. I forgot to spell that out in my notes, and that's problematic.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
For you?
Yeah.
Well, and so I read that decline in revenues, thinking that it was a result of a decline in the marijuana sales, but it's not.
It's a combination.
110 rejiggered that thing.
I
Measure
can't know
110.
exactly, but yes, we would assume that Measure 110 has an impact here, especially that drop from 2021 to 2020, that cutting in half. There's just less money in the account to be split up amongst the recipients. So when you go from $100 million and 10% goes to the counties, that's a really different number than you have $45 million and 10% of that gets split amongst the counties. So I think the drop between 18 and 19 is probably more effect of marijuana becoming more normalized and sales kind of settling. But Measure 110 passing in 2020 means it takes effect in 21, and the impacts are seen in the revenue sources as they set up the process at the state into 2022.
Okay.
Took effect February 1,
Yeah,
2021.
Okay.
So,
Thank you.
no problem. Thank you for the question. But not only did we have revenue impacts to the county, we also had programmatic impacts, and I just highlighted 3. The memo talks a little bit more details, but these I think are 3 where we really see both the benefits to the county and the programs that our staff are running and the challenges that we're facing as a result of all of it, really. So in community corrections, I think that's the one that's been most often talked about with your board in how our community corrections department is reassessing how it works for the next biennium. That loss of state revenue is largely reflected in the for how they allocated out to county departments with the population forecasting, which is how they set up those numbers. And when you also have it all, so it reduced the overall amount spent at the state level, and we ended up about $32 million short of continuing on a statewide basis, $32 million short, which then trickles down to what we're having to face here in Washington County with reductions in the state portion of funding that supports our community corrections. It also changed who community corrections is working with and the challenges they're facing and how much more complicated the cases are, as opposed to misdemeanants who have possession charges, who just need to go through some rehab and our check-ins, as opposed to very complex issues that are being stacked as we do really good supervision and follow best practices. In the sheriff's department, Sheriff Garrett really talked about what it looks like in their jail and the impact that's having on jail staff. But the number of adults in custody that are, they're coming in not because of possession charges, they're coming in for other purposes. Ends up in our jail looks different, but they may have a substance abuse disorder that sits within their needs that have to be addressed. And our medical contracts, therefore, have to accommodate and deal with and finding programs for folks to receive services to address their substance abuse if that's where they are at in their process, but also making sure that our deputies are trained to deal with the medical emergencies, the amount of drug smuggling. All of these are things that I think have been highlighted in other places, so I'll leave it at that. But it's also impacting the patrol side, as they've provided these statistics to you in the public safety and justice papers that you've seen, the amount of increased response for overdose, property crimes, which there is a correlation, but we can't expressly state a causation for, but other emergency calls when people see people using in public and they are concerned for their safety, they may call, which requires a call out. All of those things are what the sheriff's department have highlighted. But in HHS, we have a really great story to tell. HHS has worked very hard to be the countywide burn coordinator. We received funding for that. And then we've also seen investment by the state in our Center for Addiction Triage and Treatment, which is really good because the more money we can take for the building of it, the more money we have to operate in the long term. And the work that HHS has been able to do to make sure that Washington County's service providers are coordinated and working together, and that $20 million that has come to the county through all of those community-based organizations isn't being duplicated. It's going to enhance as many services as humanly possible, and also staffing up, because that's been the number one need for everyone providing services in this area, including the county, is making sure that the revenues allow for staff to do the work at each one of these community-based organizations and within the county itself. So to switch to where the legislature is generally talking and what other things we've seen out there. So this is your GR team doing the groundwork of finding out what ideas are out there. And I think this list was longer at one point, but I had some slide issues where things got deleted. And so this is what I remember. But on the criminalization side, so the first part of the reforms that have been suggested, and this is also included in your packet, there's a pretty robust 4-page document from some of our public safety and local government partners. The number one thing that most people are talking about is whether or not the policy of the state should be returning possession into a misdemeanor charge as opposed to leaving it as a violation. Another is to create a brand new misdemeanor charge related to public consumption. This is coming out of a number of conversations and anecdotes around, what we're seeing in the streets of downtowns, what we're seeing on transit, how people are feeling as they walk through their neighborhoods. Another step in this process is enhancing and expanding the alternative court processes that lead directly into supported recovery and supervised supported recovery, which is usually what community corrections has to do. So that is a pretty big, it's a twofold impact to the county, where our alternative court structure has to be sufficiently staffed, funded, and supported across the board, from public defense to DAs to courtrooms to community corrections. Commissioner Tracy.
Is that drug court? Is that what you're referring
That
to?
is that is one of the alternative court structures that we have. We don't call it a drug court anymore. We have adult recovery court. We have juvenile recovery court. We have a number of other alternative courts.
Just wanted my context.
Yes.
Thank you.
It is often just simplified as drug court, but I try to use the right words so that when people go to look for this opportunity of how to, and it's usually the criminal cases that are being faced there are property crimes where someone has an underlying substance use disorder. That is the primary purpose of those alternative courts. So using these and expanding these alternative courts, that's a lot of work. It's an expense there. It's also an expense for our community corrections folks who have to do that supervised recovery. stop with that commentary for a second. And then there's other pieces of the criminalization conversation that go to what the DAs have reported as a complicating factor, that if you cannot arrest someone on a misdemeanor for possession, it is hard for them to then turn and go into the cycle of drug distribution and start picking off the dealers that then get us into the distribution system. So talking about how we can modify other pieces of the law related to that as part of this criminalization proposed set of reforms from outside organizations. On the treatment and recovery side, there are also things that people are talking about looking at. And if you listen, if you have an extra 14 hours, none of us do, to listen to the joint committee, there's really a lot of awareness that we don't have the facilities or the workforce in place to do the treatment piece right now, and that we need more stabilization centers. We need more 24-hour detox areas. We need more treatment beds, both intensive and outpatient. And that gap is huge. And I believe those gap numbers are in the memo, and I don't have them in my head, and I can look them up if you have that question. The other thing that I think we've talked about with your board multiple times is workforce across behavioral health, not only internally, but with our CBO partners, just getting people licensed and available to do the work quickly. As we increase the physical capacity, we have to have the workforce to accompany that. There's also conversations that took place yesterday, and I listened back and forth on medication-assisted treatment for folks who are trying to recover but cannot recover cold turkey and need that additional assist. It is a complicated factor, looking at what we can do to reform there. And then finally, the mobile crisis response, increasing that. There's a lot of workforce need there. That's where our public health dollars are being spent. That's what the grant was for us, is mobile crisis. But looking at how we can enhance that so our first responders are appropriate. So those are the treatment and recovery. Large picture, there's probably more ideas out there. This is just, I think, the ones that have the most traction at this point. So this is opportunities in 2025, and I meant 2024 because the legislature is going to work on this, whether I want them to or not. But 2024,
Nice try there.
I know, I sounded weirdly optimistic. I also think it's indicative that we can do some comprehensive work in 2024, but the work will be ongoing because we will miss things, and there will be budgetary responsibilities that have to be taken in 2025. So I'm just going to play this off as totally intentional. To remind the board of the questions we're asking is right now, do you support the policy framework concept for how we address what Washington County defines as success in the Measure 110 reform work? If so, what further information do you need? And do you have further instructions to staff? So from there, I'm going to throw up what we have come up with as possible pieces of the framework. I am not saying that I believe that these are complete or perfected, but now is the time for the conversation between board members about, is this the direction you want us to head? Have we gotten it right? What changes do we need? What do we need to add? What is not your expectations for outcomes in this conversation in the 2024 session? So I will start. And again, these have been created through the GR's assessment of all the information we've gotten from our departments and in the conversations we've had with you as board members. So the number one desired outcome I have heard from our board is thinking about the safety of our community. And that means all members of our community, those suffering from a substance use disorder, those impacted by family members that need support structures, those of us who want to be in public and feel safe. All of those are considered when we talk about keeping the community safe. So I want to be really clear about that. But the number one outcome I've heard from all of you is to keep all members of Washington County's community safe through a combination of approaches to the prevention of, treatment for, and recovery from substance use disorders. That we keep people off drugs, we help them get off drugs, help them in the long term. That is an enhancement for the entire safety of our community. So that seems to be the key desired outcome. Happy to take feedback on that, or flip through the next two slides really quickly. So I'm going to leave this to you to direct me how you'd like to approach it.
I'm comfortable if you keep going.
Okay.
Is that okay with everyone else?
Just one question. Since this was a voter approved initiative, what power does legislature have to change?
Because the voter approved initiative changed statute and not the constitution, the legislature can review and reform all of it. That is the difference between measures
Okay.
5 and 10 versus measure 110 is statutory reform versus constitutional reform. So the legislature has acted in the past to reform things so that it functions within the state, and to create systems that weren't considered when measure 110 passed. So the legislature can do a lot here. Moving into the investments, this is, I think, one of the key things that reflects the potential outcomes and impacts to the county. So filling in the gaps in infrastructure and services needed to increase access for treatment that meets individuals where they are and when they are ready for treatment. Next, provide the county with resources to fund any additional programs, supervision, or criminal justice system requirements created by any reform to the criminalization portion of Measure 110. Invest in approaches that are trauma-informed, data-driven, and culturally responsive best practices for all levels of treatment programs, regardless of their entry point. If it is in voluntary, I walk in the door, I say I need help, I have access, and the treatment I'm getting is good. Or if there is a shift to go back to law enforcement directed recovery, i.e. the court system to put you in recovery, that there's still the best practices are being used there. And then finally, expand investments in the supportive services as individuals transition through their recovery to maintain housing, access to employment, and reunify with community and family. This is work that our community corrections does. But this is also barriers that community development sees in the populations they work with, and our housing department sees and the folks that they're transitioning who are going through that voluntary treatment is getting access to housing. And I think the other piece that's not reflected but is thought of in that is looking at criminal records as a barrier to some of these things, employment, housing, expungement as a process is complicated, it's long, and needs to be part of that consideration. So that way we're not putting more onus on our services to keep people able to access housing, employment, and their family. Because that's, I think, the best for everyone is if the process is faster and it doesn't require us to add to our workload. And then finally, in the overall process of what we've seen that does and doesn't work, that state programs must work in greater collaboration with county public health and behavioral health programs to support locally driven solutions that spread investments further and reduce redundant programming when the state takes over the allocation of money. They sometimes forget to consult with us, and that proves that they don't understand how we serve as a coordinating entity. And we want to really put that at the forefront because our people are dang good at their jobs. And then finally, advance workforce development to lower administrative burdens, innovate administrative processes, fund pipeline development and retention to increase the supply of behavioral health practitioners within the state. That is about the state's processes to license people to do this work.
Can I ask
Yeah,
a clarifying question on that last one?
Mhm.
It sounds similar to what we had in the legislative agenda for 23. But what I was just questioning of myself is everything that you worked on for the 23 legislature in the whole space on behavioral health workforce, all those incentives, different tidbits I remember, but all incomplete. Is all of that still encompassed in this bullet, or is it only a subset?
And now is when I phone a friend and I
really-
bring Zucker up
Yeah.
to have that conversation.
I really want to make sure that the strong support we gave you for that in 23, you still feel for 24 and into 25.
So sure. So for the record, my name is Zachar Khan, Government Relations Manager here, Washington County. And yes, Chair, to answer your question, this bullet point isn't inclusive of all of those efforts. And I'll just note, we have several core vacancies in our mobile crisis system of professionals that we need. And in addition to that, in recent weeks, you could almost mark every single week in which there's been reporting in relation to 110. There's been a reporting about behavioral health workforce. So I'm finally actually starting to see these messages permeate within the legislature to a greater audience and more people actually talking about it and wanting to do something about it. So it's really important to include this bullet point.
And I think we can include it both in the framework related to Measure 110 and a 2024 legislative agenda that we might be talking about next and might be reflected there as well.
Continuity.
So long as we're consistent in our messaging, it makes it very clear that workforce is of utmost important to this county because we recognize we need the people to do the work.
I
So,
think the only thing I'm going to say here is that, yes, we need the people to do the work, but we need the system to work for the people that are trying to get through it. I mean, that it's really,
Mhm.
it's not all that different to our, in some respects, to our permitting processes, trying to smooth things out so that people get the licensing in the most expedient fashion while recognizing what the safety factors are as well.
So, the next slide, they're really asking us, what is missing from the proposals? Now, you've gone over the framework proposal. You've touched on the fact that the packet also includes a paper and it includes a proposal from potential other partners, the joint proposal for Measure 110 reform. I didn't see that summarized in the slides per se. And when I talk, before I speak to that, I wondered, did you want to explain how that may or may not fit in?
So in the slides, instead of going through all 11,
Yeah.
it was a lot. And a lot of them felt very redundant to me. I kind of highlighted them in the 2 slides. These are summaries of them. And so instead of digging into the details and having to explain what Senate Bill 48 in 2021 did,
Yes.
I thought the materials are there. I wanted to concentrate less on the specifics there, but so one thing I will say that the policy frameworks really focus on outcomes and impacts to the county. It does not focus on the policy questions around criminalization and what level of criminalization it should be. That is because I don't feel that I have the ability to isolate that information and give a recommendation to the board from our conversations. I want you to have that conversation. That is why I asked the question, is there anything missing from the proposals within the policy framework that maybe come from this packet or other ideas that you might have?
Well, and if I might just, what's come up for me, in my getting prepared, reading all this from Friday to Sunday, I also looked into that joint committee, but I also went to the Think Out Loud broadcast of Friday, November 17th on opb.org of Senator Kate Lieber and Representative Lily Morgan, who went on that Portugal trip. And I read that interview, and that was in addition to the information that I'd read and heard Jessica Vega Peterson talked about. What it reminded me of, what I'm trying to get to, is prevention and how Portugal has also invested in prevention. And so I'm wondering, especially since for entirely different reasons, education may be a topic at the short session. I wondered if there may be a need to consider on the framework concepts page, just under investments, just a bullet on prevention steps. You know, for our young people, one pill is one too many, right? From my standpoint. So then the other thing on that slide is a question. The 4th bullet under investments, you talk about expand investments in the supportive services as individuals transition through their recovery to maintain housing, access, employment, and reunify with community and family. So So they may have existing housing, but what happens if there are some whose family members don't want them moving back into the household while they're on this journey? And it makes me wonder if some of our emergency housing and affordable housing paths come in. But then I'm reminded that the governor's office is making a proposal for statewide investment. I've learned more of this from Aaron last night, but the governor made an assumption that our region has enough because of what we've done with the affordable housing bond, despite our having that capacity is almost spoken for. And so, we have 10 more years of the supportive housing. Well, no, we have 7 more years of supportive housing, and we have a growing need for affordable housing units for that, but we don't have a path for another bond measure because it's a really bad time to propose things like that. So that piece, how do we potentially flag that some rethinking may be needed with regard to the regional need for affordable housing?
Yeah, there's a lot in that. And I think that we can definitely rework the framework to be more explicit that what we need the state to invest in is our needs here within the region. To put a fine point on it, they think that we raise the funding so they don't have to send it to us, and that we'll just build it with our own funding and the rest of the state can be paid for out of the states. And that's, wrong. It's not how things work. Or that's not how we want. It's not effective.
It's not just about the work, it's where we have need.
Yeah.
They need to realize we've been doing what we can, but yet there's still more need.
Mm-hmm. So I think one of the words that I'm keying into that we wrote, or I wrote, that might be needs reform is maintain housing, but make sure that they have access to housing. Instead of maintaining housing is perhaps the right way to place that.
Sure.
So maintain secure housing. Because when folks, if they're coming through treatment and moving out of long-term homelessness, there's steps to that. And we need to make sure all steps have access and they can stay there and be successful as they progress through, but also can move out of emergency shelters to clear those beds for other folks and move into more permanent supportive housing. Thank you.
Well, so I just priming the pump on the framework, or if you have any questions on any portion of the material, who would like to go first or next?
I could go. Hi, Erin.
Hi.
By the way, thanks for sitting down with me to talk through this, or giving me the opportunity to have a briefing before this. Prepping this material, and I realized that the League of Cities proposal was just something for us to read. I think I took it too literal and had a bit of a reaction about some of the reclassifying. And last night, something the chair mentioned, I came across the joint committee at a hearing that was
Very long hearing yesterday.
that really got the media attention. And last night I was reading and I was sort of reflecting what my comments or questions would be here. And I think, to be fair, you've addressed all these points. But I really agree with Amanda Marshall, a former U.S. attorney for Oregon, who said, and I'll quote, "Both my academic knowledge and lived experience have convinced me beyond any doubt that we cannot arrest our way out of this crisis. Locking people up has never been a solution for public health crisis, and fentanyl doesn't change that fact. We need to do what we know works and provide the housing, the treatment prevention, outreach, harm reduction, services, education, job training, and healthcare that people need and voters have overwhelmingly supported." And I reflected back to also look what the vote turnout was for the yes and the no. And that was almost 58.9% I think was the yes vote, and 41.454 was the no vote. So I think you have everything addressed here. But for me, I think of the things that I'm really interested, which you called out that you should keep an eye on, is exactly what the chair mentioned as well, prevention, but also providing housing, treatment, and then harm reductions, services, education, and then as well as job training, which probably fits into the point Zakir was making earlier about the workforce, behavioral workforce. So I think that's where I'm coming from in terms of where we should go as a county to keep the desired outcome that you laid out in the previous slide, to keeping our community safe and making Washington County as safe and accessible place where, so.
Thank you. I see it in there. Go ahead, Commissioner Treese.
Well, thank you very much for this work. It's great work. I know it's a complicated situation at the very best. In talking with you ahead of time, I did express my view is that our role here is about the safety of our community, and that means for everybody in the community. So, and while I understand how overwhelmingly Measure 110 passed, I think we have to take into consideration what that time frame was like, what the situation was there, and the differences in the landscape that we talked about earlier today with the fentanyl crisis, with the pandemic, with the open use type of pieces that have impacted the safety of our community at large. So I don't lean hard on criminalization, but I do lean hard on making sure that our community is safe. And what are the steps that we need to take for that safety, both for those that have addiction related issues and for those who don't. So this is really tough, and I understand that, but I do believe that there is a level of reform that needs to occur. And I really appreciate the work that you've done to pull out the different pieces here. I think that before I make take a hard stance, I want to hear what my fellow commissioners have to say. And I also want to understand a little bit about where we think the legislature is going, so that we can spend our political capital, to use terminology that the chair uses a lot, really effectively as we deal with this moving forward. So that's.
I will start answering this question and look to my colleague to correct me when I get stuff wrong. I think on the treatment and recovery side, there's a lot more unified conversation that's happening about reforms and investments and making sure that those investments stay in place and continue. On the criminalization side, I've heard a number of things. It's very hard to know. I think what between the polling and the conversations, public consumption is the place where criminalization reform is most likely to happen. I think that there's a lot of conversation that has to take place. I will also say, and this is going to come up in the next presentation, the 2024 session is kind of riding this thin line of, can we have a session, and the impacts of not having a session if we get to out there one way or the other, is another piece of the calculus that I don't know that majority leadership has fully gotten the math back on. Measure 110 reform is going to be part of what keeps them together if they can find the right package. But I do think on the criminalization side, there is not agreement as to undoing Measure 110's possession, the level of criminal ramifications for that. But I do think that there is more cohesion, but not complete cohesion around public consumption. Okay. And that is open use in public spaces. And that is another complicated and multifactored issue, because the conversation there is about that is how we make the public feel safe. It is the thing that is highlighting the change in opinion that they're seeing in the polling around Measure 110. But if we criminalize public consumption, who are we criminalizing? And what are we driving behavior to change, the changed behavior? Where are they going instead? I will say that in conversations with our local jurisdictional partners, TriMet is very focused on this issue because of their concerns for their drivers and ridership
Passengers.
numbers, users like that. I think a lot of our local city partners, that's where they found cohesion in that packet of 4 pages, those 11. That's one of those things that I think a lot of them are leaning in towards. So I think if the legislature will take that into account. Yesterday's testimony by AOC, which I don't have in my head, is also very focused on the outcomes to counties and making sure that we can do the work that is expected of us, because most of this work falls to us to do.
And that was a testimony from AOC, is that what you're
From
saying?
AOC in public comment at yesterday's joint committee hearing.
Thank you. I think my overriding message here is thank you for providing this information and giving us the full spectrum. And the other thing I want to make, I didn't say it as clearly, we have to be as focused on behavioral health and treatment as we possibly can. And I had a great deal of respect for the work that we're doing with CAT, and anything that we can do from state funding, whatever, to push that along, we need to do.
Okay. Thank you.
Did, for AOC testimony yesterday, was that from AOC government relations staff?
Yes.
Okay.
They were part of the public testimony. They were not a specific panel. So staff attended. Other county commissioners gave their own opinions, speaking on behalf of themselves. But AOC's GR public safety person is the one who provided the testimony.
Great.
And I'll,
Mr. Rogers or Willie?
I can
Someone?
just add
Sorry.
to, sorry,
sorry,
Chair,
Dr.
to jump in there. Just to add to Erin's comments, and I agree with her assessment as she's just laid it out for you. I think you're likely to see a lot of innovation and policy on the behavioral health side. There is a solid acknowledgement that we are in a crisis and that we haven't tried all solutions yet. And what that ends up looking like is really up to all of the feedback that is given to the legislature from a multitude of different partners. And I think there's also a strong regional approach as well, where, different members of that committee are hearing things from different parts of the state. And a strong unified mission coming from many different counties is helpful, which is why we're really glad to see that AOC was well represented in that hearing. I think there will be potentially strong investments in infrastructure and in workforce. And you'll see a lot of underlying policies to go along with that, which is why we included on that slide related to workforce about reducing administrative burden. Because one of the current challenges is that, for instance, if you're trying to get licensed as a social worker in Oregon, you're waiting a really long time because there's a significant backlog. And they haven't figured out how to properly clear that backlog. And I put it in a call to the counselor's office in the state as well, so the Licensed Professional Board of Counselors and Therapists. And they said, we don't have a backlog. We process applications in 2 weeks. And so if you're an applicant who is sitting there waiting, anywhere from 2 to 6 months for your application to go through, and you're coming from another state, you're not going to wait 6 months for a job. You're just going to go to another state, or you're going to stay in the state that you're in. And so when we talk about reducing administrative burden, this is the fundamental impact that we're trying to draw. I think the other challenge too is, and this is in relation to mobile crisis, we need qualified mental health professionals and qualified mental health associates. The funding that was in House Bill 2949 that I wrote in the legislature in 2021 has dried up. And for months, MACPO, who's the credentialing organization, has asked the legislature for additional funds so that they could help process more people to go work in the mobile crisis system. And in fact, I was on a call with AOC, and the Secretary of State is doing an audit of the mobile crisis system. So I was there with Commissioner Schaefer and Jessica Pratt from AOC. And this is a complete state problem, that they cannot get enough staffing for mobile crisis. And so something fundamentally has to change. There has to be an investment in workforce development in that sector. And I think from talking to staff in Senator Lieber's office, they realize that there needs to be additional funds coming to help position the states of the setup to be successful.
I think there's one thing that you said that I got confused.
Sure.
And it was on is there a backlog or not
Yeah.
on applications? If I heard you correctly, the state is saying they don't have a backlog, that they process all applications within 2 weeks.
Oh, so I can clarify that, Chair.
Thank you.
So
Didn't hear.
no problem. So for counselors, so there's different state entities that do licensure for the state. And so for counselors, there is no backlog, but for social workers, there is a
Oh,
backlog.
okay. Thank you.
So they would need
Yep.
additional staff to help get through that backlog because there's a lot more social workers than there are
Yes,
counselors.
yes, yes.
I'd like to add one more thing to my statement too.
Mhm.
And I talked about public safety and our responsibility about public safety. What I haven't said is that I also believe that we need to be looking at equity across the board when we approach these issues. And, bottom line, our court system doesn't replace the recovery systems, and we need to make sure that we have that equity lens in everything that we do, but especially here.
Commissioner Willie or Commissioner Rogers, do you have anything you'd like to add, ask about or comment on?
Well, I think Measure 110 has created unintended consequences that we need to deal with. And I'm sorry, but I think the statement you read, Nafisa, was Pollyanna at best. We cannot hope these people who are addicted and are creating problems in the system and in our society to just voluntarily say, I have a problem and I'm going to check myself in. That just doesn't happen on a very regular basis. If we don't have some form or fashion where we have the ability to arrest these people, and misdemeanor certainly is perfectly fine, then it's going to all be voluntary. I mean, if you're openly consuming drugs on a public street or in a public venue, and all you get is a ticket, that's not going to be sufficient to get you to say, okay, I have a problem, or I'm not going to do this again. Case in point, why is the Portland region the highest auto theft in the country? Why are each one of us paying exorbitant auto insurance? It's because of the inability to arrest somebody when they steal a car. So these are all, to me, consequences that we want to say, yeah, let's be nice and let's be kind and let's hope everybody does the right thing when we know for a fact that's not happening. And if you just look at your revenues that you put up there and what has happened over the last 2 years when Measure 110 came into place, we're seeing a significant degradation of our safety and significant increase in, quite frankly, addiction. Now, I agree with we need to enhance our behavioral health and our mental health industry. We need to do everything we can there. I think the CAT is going to be a great thing. It's unfortunate that it's taken us so long to get that online, but it's going to be a great thing for Washington County. We can do all of those things, but they can be done in conjunction with each other. One does not have to go away to make the other one more successful. So that's just my perspective on this. Might be a little bit hard line, but still, I believe that the old, what is it? The old philosophy is you don't do the crime if you can't do the time. And we just need to get, and then one more thing to it. The downside to what I just said is that our jail is not the place for these people to be detoxed. And that's why we're having trouble with getting jail personnel, because it's violent and it's also not what they're trained to do, is take care of people detoxing. So yeah, that's the downside to all of this. So I don't have an answer to that, but there is some middle ground in that. So that's my radical stance.
Thank you, Commissioner Willie. Commissioner Rogers?
My comment would be what's possible and what's sustainable. Yeah, and I always look at that, and maybe that's an occupational issue, maybe it's just the way I look at life. A couple of references. One, yesterday, listening to WA, and it's pretty obvious that I think it was Susan Peck who was on speaker, Susan Flanders, she said, we're responsible for everything, and what can we do for everything? And I thought that was an interesting comment. And last night I was listening to projections of the state at the ACT meeting, and they were saying how much, and even with flows of additional dollars, it's not to keep up with inflation, so they can't sustain. So I look at it and say, if I were in their seat, we're asking for everything. I mean, we're asking for more dollars here. We're asking for courthouses. We're asking for road monies. We're asking for infrastructure, and not that we don't need it. I agree, but I don't know how many silver bullets we have. I remember when I was a kid and watched The Lone Ranger. He didn't have that many bullets, but even though they were silver, how many do we have? How much can we ask? And are we creating programs that are sustainable for periods of time? I don't have the answer to that. You all go down there and do that fine work. You lobby for everything, you get some of it. But if we ask for everything, do we tend to look like we're not disciplined, or I don't know. I mean, I'm not an expert, you guys are. I'm purely just reacting to hearing, but we want more, and I'm kind of going, I agree, we want more. We should get more.
Never waste a good crisis.
Yeah, waste a good, another good term. Never waste a good crisis.
I think that some of this is also in reflecting at how Measure 110 funding has gone out the door and how we do make it sustainable, so that right now the structure is set up so that folks in a burn have to go back every 2 years and ask for same continuing funding. And what does that mean once you've invested that funding in the workforce that you have been able to hire? Is that sustainable? Is that the right system? And I think that that's some of what we're trying to address in these policy frameworks. Is that I think the word that's missing that I really appreciated from you, Commissioner Rogers, is sustainable. The system has to be sustainable regardless of what part of the system we're talking about. We can't have influxes in funding or constant ratcheting down of funding on community corrections while we have enhanced expectations to do this type of work, or having our behavioral health folks try to coordinate a program and lose that funding for that position who's able to do that. Like that's the sustainability piece that I think we should better reflect in the framework. So I appreciate that thought. There is a revenue source. It is the marijuana tax. We need to look at that and make sure that we're asking how you spend that money. Yes, we're also asking for more, but we'll always ask for more and then be happy to get enough for now.
Is there any, my only question is there anything in this proposal in 4 years, because you're all likely to be here, I will not, but when you look back, that you're going to be embarrassed by, that we didn't couch it in such a way that we can say, we told you that this was, just the nut that we had to kind of develop more. Is there anything that we're saying, we're not overemphasizing, saying, well, just give us money and we'll do all these things? Are you comfortable with the ask? And
I think the framework that we've outlined has been mindful of the impacts to our county programs and their ability to perform the services if sufficiently funded. And I never have questioned that I'm going to feel uncomfortable with asking them to pay us for the work they demand of us. I think that's very reasonable. I think in the long run, it becomes the constant conversation with the state legislature of you keep adding to the shared services, but you keep forgetting to add the funding in. And that is, I will never be ashamed to ask for it. I think that the ramifications will be a different problem, but that's not sitting on my lap. That's sitting in the legislatures.
Thank you.
Perhaps shouldn't have said that part out loud.
Thank you. Irrespective, or despite the couple of small things that I had on the framework, I do have a couple of more remarks to share. I appreciated seeing that joint proposal because the explanation under the restoring the criminalization, or however the words go, the explanations helped me better understand exploring the art of the possible. It's not like just all of a sudden going from one aspect 180 degrees, but rather looking at how we can get the accountability built in and get people connected to services, moving away from just entirely voluntary, oh, they can blow us off, to no, you're having an impact to your community and there are ramifications to your choices, even if you're not aware of them. So I just wanted to come back to that point, given Commissioner Willie's comment. So another thing I'm wondering about, I don't know firmly if it's something to add to the list or not. Our team has done a phenomenal job for the cat, but our schedule has been delayed because of the availability of on the construction side. Well, is there anything the state can do or the trades can do to bump us up in priority? We're competing, there's private market competition for construction. Well, we have all these people in our community that need help. Could we accelerate the delivery of that construction by 6 months and pull it back in to the end of 2024 or earlier in 2025? I don't know, but if I don't ask, I can't get. So I figured I better raise it. And you'll figure out how to ask for that in a smart fashion that I can't do today. A couple of other things, and the following are ones that pertain to me as one member of this board. Learning all of this, knowing of this, it means I need to keep pressing hard on the public safety replacement effort through 2025, right? This all goes back to community safety. I need to keep pressing hard on the jail expansion project through 2026. I need to keep pressing on the state legislature for funding for public safety and justice, juvenile, community corrections, district attorney, as well as for mental health and substance use disorder. I have to just keep pressing. I also spent time trying to do the math to increase our use, double our adult recovery court. Let's double it. Let's ask for the resources to double it. And I realize it's not just the court, right? There are all the workers involved, which touches on community corrections as well. But what if we add the homeless court, right? We have co-occurring problems here. So I tried to do that work, exploring ways to keep the criminal court at least stable, enforcement, adult, juvenile, along with community corrections, juvenile justice stability. We have to keep pressing to get all parts of our public safety and justice work stable, as well as increasing the capacity of the adult recovery court and mental health court, and add homeless court. And we have to do this because it addresses the human community need we have here in Washington County. We know, the board, have been informed that our specialty courts cost more than our standard criminal court. Okay, but what's important is that they deliver better outcomes, and that's what we want, right? So we've asked, what does it take to enable more specialty courts? This is where, I'll admit it, I was personally hurt that through our expressing the interest to increase that outcome, that it was summarized in the version 2 paper as attempts to dismantle and pause. So I want to make sure it's abundantly clear that this board, from everything I know, is only interested in building up our alternative court system. I've not had any experience that says otherwise. But I also want to explain that I spent a lot of time on our current fiscal year 24 information on Sunday, trying to come up with what do we need to ask for in concrete terms, right? We have legislators that'll ask us, well, so what are you really asking for? The nuts and bolts. So I tried to figure it out, and I learned an awful lot about account fund 51,110 and 51,105. And pawing through all of that and figuring out what portion of community corrections does what, and the district attorney does what for the 3 existing courts, and trying to derive the use of sheriff's office deputies to move folks around and community corrections for parole and probation. So I came up with a minimum of $500,000, but it felt more like $1 million to me. So somehow some smarter people than me here in Washington County who are really on top of this data need to come up with some minimum dollar amounts that the state's going to need to fork over so we can double our adult recovery court, so we can add a homeless court. And so I have been energized to redouble my efforts, or to start my efforts for a fiscal year 25 proposed budget, to find out how there is county discretionary dollars, primarily general fund, but that includes lottery dollars, gain share, and SIP, how we are doing some non-county-wide things for that, or with that money, so that we can redirect more of that money into community corrections and other parts of our public safety and justice system. So I put a lot on myself, but it's all about serving the needs that are very real here in my Washington County community. And I take that kind of personally. That's all I had to say. Thank you all for listening to me.
So I'm gonna do a quick temperature check. What I'm hearing is you think what we have so far is not bad, maybe some minor tweaks, some enhancement of some language, adding prevention, investment into what we're talking about, much more explicitly talking about housing and folding that into this.
We just
Maybe-
weren't sure
yeah.
if maintain housing covered those people who need more secured
Yeah.
housing, and it could be affordable.
Okay. I'm also hearing maybe creating some more concrete numbers of what it takes to do some of the things that are being suggested.
specific
So if you're like
examples.
giving
Yeah.
specific examples, and I think that that's work that we can, in this budget season, totally ask of everyone at the county to add. I know that our alternative court structures aren't just a compromise with or not a compromise, a partnership between
Not
district
just
attorneys
add
and
on, it depends
but
on the base.
Yeah, HHS is also an active partner, and I think that's where the base for this one Washington County approach comes from in these frameworks, is that these departments do work together. The one piece that I've heard a little bit and haven't been able to put too fine a point onto is this concept of criminal accountability as part of this conversation, and if there is a direction that this board would like us to head. I've heard directly from Commissioner Willie that he would like to see that. Chair Harrington, I've heard a little bit of that in your conversation.
I have check marks approval on all 11 of these items.
So Commissioner Rogers, you spoke broader to the sustainability of all of this. Is that something that is on your radar and you would like to see included in this framework? Okay. Commissioner Tracy, you said you wanted to hear from your colleagues as well. I would like to know if this conversation has enhanced or changed your where you're sitting in any of your comments previously. No. Okay. Commissioner Fye, same question to you. Are you comfortable the direction we're headed right now and how we need to wordsmith this? And do you have any questions about the question of criminal accountability is feeding into this system?
Thank you, Erin, for asking that. You know, this also came up with AOC's, I was hoping to listen into what they were going to say about strengthening tools the criminal system can use to fight illegal drug use and sales. Is that what you're referring to in terms of the criminal?
I mean, there's many pieces of it, but I think if you look in this packet, probably what we're most likely talking about is policy proposal. Sorry, reading really fast is not my strength today. There was something in here around policy proposal number 2, the Boyd-Hubble fix, modifying statutory definition of controlled substance delivery to include the transfer of drugs in the possession with intent to transfer drugs. That is about dealing as opposed to possession.
Yeah, I'd like to, let me come back to you on that one. I'm not in support of.
No, there
Yeah.
isn't an optional vote later. We have to give direction now.
I think, yes, it's very helpful because what the next step is we need to be prepared to have this conversation with the legislature as soon as possible, because if we wait until February, we don't have a minute to change anything. So I do think the question that I'm asking is fairly explicit. Where are you right now on the criminalization questions related to possession, to changing the delivery and transfer of drugs, and public consumption?
And is this tossing to the modifying, is this tossing back? Basically, it's bunting to the legislator.
Well, the legislature is the only
Implementation
one that can make
They're
this
the only
change
one,
because all
yeah.
criminal laws are only set at the state level. They have to be statewide. We don't have different criminal codes and processes by county. That is always done. So it is, yes, the question is, what are we asking of the legislature at the state level to do related to the criminal code?
Yeah, no, I'm with you. Thank you for that journey of explanation right there. When it comes to dealers, I'm with you to see what the state legislator comes up with. I'm not on that journey when it comes to the users.
Okay. I do think in listening to where the commissioners are, we do have a tip in the criminalization conversation towards the proposals that are here, mindful of the impacts to our system and our community. So I will address that in the framework as well. And we will come back in January because it's when we have a minute. We will come back with a proposed framework for your final consideration and direction on. And in the meantime, we appreciate this has been a really challenging conversation. This is a very challenging issue, but it is something that is going to have a profound impact, not just on our county, but on our communities. And we appreciate your thoughtful conversation. And with that, I will say we're done with this.
Okay, commissioners, our next topic is the 2024 legislative agenda. That too is slated for a 1-hour conversation.
I do think we can be faster than that if you'd like us to be.
So I just wanted to get to the fact that we are going to take a break before we go, certainly no later than before we go to the ARPA conversation. So, but we'll also have to be mindful of how long we get in that conversation.
Yeah. And the GR team is working. There are a couple of them that are, I believe, coming in online because they have been ill. So are Tracy and Pablo there? I will.
Oh, and if,
yeah.
sorry,
Okay.
while that's happening, Ms. Angie had to depart due to some personal family needs. And so Ms. Calvert has stepped in to represent for the remainder of the afternoon. So I didn't explain that clearly before because I wanted everybody to just get settled. So,
Yes, and we will try to talk even faster.
oh, don't do that.
just kidding,
No, no,
just
no.
kidding.
Aaron, you
Uh,
have such a great capacity to.
While my colleagues are coming back, I will start on slide one just so we can be mindful of the time that we are taking. But we do think that this can be a relatively quick conversation because this is the second time we are coming to your board to talk about the 2024 proposed legislative agendas. The whole GR team for Clean Water Services and the county have been working on these slides. We have not created the agenda document yet, largely because time is real and I don't have enough of it. And neither does anyone else. So we are working through this before you because the intention is to be at the board meeting next week for final approval. So today we're going to remind you of the questions we're asking, and then talk through what we're proposing for the federal agenda, what we're proposing for the state agenda, and then really quickly through the next steps. I can do this really quickly. That's fun. So obviously we're here to propose the potential 2024 legislative federal and state agendas for both Washington County and Clean Water Services. Because we have traditionally in the last 3 or 4 years jointly put together these agendas so that both logos and your representation within those documents are the same. So the policy questions are, should staff finalize the draft legislative agenda for as we're proposing it for board approval and action at the December 12th meeting, and similarly for the state agenda. So we'll start with the proposed federal legislative agenda. And this is just a reminder that the format, which is included in the packet from 2023, for our format for federal agenda is more focused on guiding principles for our federal lobbying team. It allows them to be nimble and focus on identifying issues of the highest concern that might be addressed by Congress, because we never really get to set congressional pacing or agenda setting, but it allows us to be responsive to seek what we need. As a result of that, we were seeing minimal changes recommended at the county level. I would also just note for the board's awareness that in January or February, we will be coming back to the board to talk about what potential earmarks you could prioritize and consider for next year's congressional budget process, even though they haven't bothered to finish this year's. It's fine. Everything's fine. But that conversation will come towards the end of January or the beginning of February. We are now working with departments to identify what the potential world is and where you have already spoken to what we might be asking for. So I'll turn it over now to Zachar to talk about the proposed changes to the county's federal agenda.
So commissioners, we are recommending a change from the current federal agenda item that focuses on COVID-19 response and recovery to going for more broad categories so that we can try to obtain funds from many different efforts to fund public health. So the recommended change is to secure ongoing public health funding to support response to ongoing and future public health challenges and opportunities. So another example of this is if on a federal level, we see innovative opportunities where we can step in as a county to get things that are funded and not be unfunded, then that's an opportunity that we could take advantage of. And then again, if there's a public health challenge in response to another pandemic or public health emergency, that's another opportunity we can take advantage of.
Since there are multiple slides with different topic areas, can we do thumbs up on each slide as we go?
Going to suggest recommend.
Commissioners on this slide? Great.
Excellent.
I'll turn it over to Tracy.
Thank you. And hopefully you can hear me. Good afternoon, Chair Harrington and Board of Directors for Clean Water Services. I'm Tracy Rainey, Senior Policy Analyst. I apologize I'm not able to be there in person today. I'm a little bit under the weather, unfortunately. Thank you again for the opportunity to present on our proposed state and federal legislative agendas for 2024. We have not made any changes to the recommended 2024 agenda since the last time we presented to the board in October. On this slide that you will see our proposed 2024 federal legislative agenda, which includes 6 items that are being carried over from the 2023 agenda. In addition, you will see 1 new item. Again, we covered this when we presented in October. This is an item that our staff recommended be added to our federal agenda. It is the last bullet that is included on the slide. A similar priority was included as part of our state legislative agenda for 2023. And that state item is going to be proposed to be carried forward for 2024. So we're recommending a similar priority to be included on the federal agenda. Our staff felt this was important in the context of recent conversations, including with the National Association of Clean Water Agencies. Regarding this proposed priority, as you know, our staff works really diligently to reduce potential sources of contaminants that might enter into our system. When it comes to certain emerging contaminants, including per and polyfluoroalkyl substances, also known as PFAS, source reduction and pollution prevention efforts are really important, especially when there may not be cost-effective or reliable technologies available to treat or remove certain emerging contaminants. So really, this last priority is intended to reflect our efforts to advocate for resources to support source control and pollution prevention approaches, including pre-treatment programs. It's also reflective of the need to continue to advance research to inform policies that are based in science and data, and to ensure that policies reflect the role of water utilities, as we are not producers or manufacturers of these contaminants. And then in that, promote a producer responsibility approach. So any questions on that slide?
I just wanted to add that the new item is also, I think, reflective of the discussions that we've had at our recent Clean Water Services Learning Days for the Board of Directors. So commissioners.
Can I, just one quick question?
Yeah.
Actually, Mark and Tracy, if you guys could just let us know what, because this is the first 6 are repetitive. Are we making any progress on those? And you don't have to answer this today, just if you could get back to us with kind of a little bit of a, are we moving the
Yeah,
dial at
absolutely.
all
We
on
could, we
this?
could do a quick memo.
And then
on each of those.
the last item certainly would seem to be a national, emphasis as well. So do we have a consortium of other water providers similar to what we do? There's some of their concerns about this as well.
So-
The
is there-
National Association of Clean Water Agencies
Yeah,
that
so
Tracy mentioned.
we're kind of joining with a bigger picture, but also where we're going with this. So yeah, just a quick report on that. So
Happy
thank
to
you.
provide that.
Okay, yeah, and other than that, we're good.
Commissioner Rogers, your thumbs up?
Fine.
Yep, great.
Yeah, told you we'd be fast. Let's talk about the state legislative agenda. Just a reminder of the format. We have 3 pieces to the state's, the county's piece, and then we have the Clean Water Services agenda as well. The counties has guiding principles, which are overarching. They guide the review and evaluation of every single legislative proposal that we look over, and they work statewide or system-wide. Second, we do the legislative priorities. These are the primary focuses. They're one-offs. They're the yearly thing, although this year it's second year at most of them. But they are much more hyper-focused. And then third, we do service-specific guiding principles that are related to the different services the county provides and what guides them as they do the analysis of legislation that impacts their ability to do their jobs. In those 3 parts, this time we are not making any recommended changes to the guiding principles, but we'll go over them really quickly anyway. We're updating our priorities for 2024 and then proposing some new and modified housing principles, and we'll get into that. The state session is short in the even years, 6 weeks. And right now, what we've heard from legislature and the governor, there's 3 things. School funding, apparently that's an issue. Addiction treatment, apparently that's a conversation, and housing are the really big things, and the rest is monetary, small tweaks, small changes. There are other things that everybody's bringing forward. We'll figure out if anybody can want to do that. But really, again, the message being, let's get through a 2024 session as opposed to let's interrupt it in the middle and then compromise behind closed doors. So nothing's guaranteed. I can't promise that that's how it'll look, but this legislative agenda is reflective of that. And with that, I forgot who I'm turning it over to. Oh, it's me. This is just a reminder of what our guiding principles are and have been for quite some time. We haven't reorganized them in any way. They're just holding directing from 2023 to carry them forward to 2024. And of course, the most important ones are our local control of the processes and services that we provide and preventing unfunded mandates. And I thought I had turned that off, so I apologize. So these are the guiding principles. You're good with not changing them.
Yes, yes.
Thank you. Into our priorities. This is where Pablo.
Hi, everyone. Thanks. And I'm so sorry I can't be there. I unfortunately, like Tracy, I'm feeling under the weather today. Another key priority we are proposing is to secure stabilized and sustainable funding for services that the state requires the county to provide. So, as you all know, counties are already required to implement a wide range of state mandates. Our public safety system is a really good example of that, where our county is required to provide a local jail, a courthouse, a law library, prosecutors, juvenile services, and community correction services as well. So this priority is really meant to focus our work on ensuring that all state mandates are fully funded and to help us focus on securing additional funding for underfunded services that were created in the current budget. So, like Aaron was suggesting there, while short sessions are not typically seen as the time for many large budgetary adjustments, each new session does bring the potential for more unfunded or underfunded mandates. So, we would like to prioritize ensuring that any new mandates are attached to full funding that will allow Washington County to implement any new requirements. So, this priority also helps us look at those state mandates that we are currently underfunded for example, and this came up in the last presentation, during the 2023 legislative session, the legislature cut community corrections funding statewide by $32 million. That translated into a $1.2 million cut to Washington County when you compare it to the amount of funding we received in the previous biennium. So to address that reduction in funding, we would like to pursue additional resources for our community corrections department in the short session to ensure that they have a continuing service level of funding for the second half of the state's budget biennium. Are we on the next slide? Can we move to the next slide, please?
Not yet.
Oh, sorry.
We're
Yep.
going to checkpoint with the commissioners.
Oh,
where
great.
So, I feel like we're delivering a mixed message. That first bullet, obtain additional funding for blah, 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 sounds too positive. We have a public safety and justice paper that talks about how we have a crisis in our system. And moments ago, I used the word stabilize. We need to obtain additional funding to stabilize our community correction services and continue service levels for the second half of the year. So
Parentheses, give our money back.
this isn't, we want more so we can do a better job.
Yeah.
No, we have a system that has been crushed, cratered, and we're just trying to keep the patient alive. Bad analogy, but my point is, I just found it a little too rosy.
Thank you, Chair Harrington. That's really good feedback. I think we shouldn't have any trouble incorporating stronger language in there that shows how we're really being hurt by the current budget and how we really need that additional funding to be able to keep the lights on and avert crisis.
Thank you for being out front of us in these forums.
We will make that adjustment when we bring the proposed agenda back to
Wait,
you. So
that was just me.
yeah.
Commissioners,
Well, good.
you okay with that?
With that change in mind. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you. Now we'll go to the next slide, Pablo. You're muted.
Thank you. So the next priority I wanted to highlight for you all is supporting funding to initiate the planning process for replacing the county's courthouse. Our local courthouse is really a nexus point where we implement a lot of the public safety related state mandates that I highlighted above. It is over 100 years old. It's seismically unsafe, and it's too small to manage the large amount of judicial proceedings that a county of our size inevitably is going to have. So in the 2024 legislative session, we would like to resubmit our request for matching state dollars to begin the process of planning for a new courthouse that's modern, safe, and large enough to meet the needs of our personnel and the communities they serve. We know this is a bit of a long shot because courthouses are typically funded in at the beginning of a budget cycle, but we want to keep the need at the top of our list to help prepare for the 2025 legislative session. And of course, this is a situation where it's possible that we could get the funding, so we don't want to miss an opportunity just by not trying, right? But I will say it is a bit of an uphill battle in a short session to obtain funds like this, particularly when other issues have been stated as priorities by legislative leadership. But with that, I think I'm done with this slide. Are there any questions or
So
comments? Yeah.
first on that expands capacity to blah, blah, blah. Why can't we just be clear? Please fund the 2 judges that the OJD or whoever the right Chief Justice asked for last session. Because otherwise, the way it comes across right now is after you give us money to plan a new courthouse and after we've built it, we're going to be back to ask for more judges. And that's not what we need right now at all. We really need those 2 judges right now.
We can add that as a separate bullet point. I think this was physical capacity. Sorry, Pablo, I stepped in there.
Good, no worries.
We can add, but we would, if the thumbs up are all around.
Well, wait a minute. In light of the chair's positioning here, I think we're not asking to improve the public safety system. I think we're saying this is necessary for the public safety system. I think that in that vein, I think that's important. And I'm thumbs up.
Maybe sustain would be a better word than,
I think it's necessary.
yeah.
So here's what I would suggest is instead of phrase which will improve how, we
say
scratch that out and say necessary to for, yes.
Yes. Thank you.
Necessary for the public safety system
Serving.
or growing. We'll make sure the.
But we need 2 now for the community we already have. Forget that it's growing.
Yeah.
Okay.
For the current and growing or something. I don't know.
With those proposed changes, is everyone good with this as a priority?
I just take out growing. Serves our community.
Let them wordsmith.
Yeah, I will. I'm not, I really agree with just putting the foot down on the pedal a little
The
more.
only thing I didn't say anything because we keep saying it's our courthouse, which technically is correct, but they occupy the state. And we keep on saying, yeah, gee, we need more judges for us. We don't need any more judges for us. We need it for the state system.
Right.
And so I don't know how other communities have sold their systems, but I mean, it sounds like Washington County needs this, Washington County needs that. Frankly, we need it to support their system, not ours. I mean, that's their system. We're just housing them. That's all we're doing. So when they look at this, they say, well, Washington County wants a new courthouse. Courthouse in some places I've been means administrative offices, all kinds of things. It doesn't necessarily mean courtrooms.
I think so. To answer your questions, Commissioner, the courthouse, how we message about the courthouse is this is the partnership piece. We've always emphasized partnership when it comes to the 2023 session. We'll do the same in 2024. The courthouse is a partnership because we pay for half if we plan it correctly. But we can make sure that that messaging is very clear that we're asking this to serve your expectations, not just our community's expectations. But
does the term courthouse mean something different to different people?
I don't believe it does. The courthouse has always meant and it includes the administration of the courts, everyone who has to sit in the courthouse, and that's never been questioned.
Some counties with a different hat on, and they call it the courthouse, and they have their county commissioners in it.
Oh,
they have everybody in the courthouse.
In Washington County and in our delegation, that has never been a question. And because this comes through the Oregon Judicial Department's budget process, they understand that this is the judicial court, as opposed to we use the nomenclature of a county commission and others use the county court with an actual judge instead of a chair. So this has never been a point of confusion to our delegation or in the asks.
Curious.
So no, I'm happy to clarify that. So thank you for that question to make sure that we're on the right page. So it looks like we're good here. So okay, turning it over to Zachar.
Commissioners, we've retained this from the previous session, develop policies to enable the county to recruit and retain the talent necessary for our communities to thrive, with special focus on behavioral health workforce here, and also to obtain tools to help Oregon gain a competitive advantage in hiring nationally. We're going against states for labor, and the policies don't always reflect the tools necessary to recruit against other markets. And so I know there's a couple of proposals floating around this session. This also speaks to what the chair said about construction and the need for future workforce here to be ready to do the work that we need to do in local communities.
And is that only in the behavioral health realm?
For the tools necessary the second
Like a
bullet
bullet.
point is not just for behavioral health workforce,
Okay,
it's for
good,
all workforce.
I agree.
Across the sectors.
Yep.
But I have a question here. I understand this is the short session, really short, limited numbers of bills and whatnot. But I've also been learning through AOC some of the impacts of the budget decisions made in the long session. And so I just wanted to bring voice to the fact that through the Assessors Association and therefore the General Revenue Subcommittee at AOC, I've learned about how at most our assessment and taxation funding is we're getting 10%. And it seems to me like an increasingly dire situation. So I wasn't sure if, and I'm afraid that what it'll do is it'll put more pressure on our assessment and taxation team, and we'll end up losing the very people that we can't afford to lose. And this is why on this slide, I was thinking about the workforce and the effects of some of these decisions. Now, it could very well go over into some of the guiding principles, but I figured I'd raise it here just because of the story I just told you.
As we've approached this in the past in 2023, we had conversations with Sheriff Garrett about like, this is the retention and recruitment that's got to be supported for his workforce, but behavioral health has been one of those areas where we're seeing a crushing need, where the tools and the state's decisions are really hindering our ability to do things. But for our sheriff's department, the full proper funding of the DPSST, which the training facilities for police officers and public safety officers, those sorts of things. And that's where the second bullet point, also thinking medical examiners, things like that, all of these things that have touch points on what we do, but also we need construction workers to build housing, to build the industrial sites that we're expecting. So we're trying to be broad and thoughtful and join in coalition with folks like AOC when it comes to the A&T and making sure we can do all of the things to bring all of the people so they want to work here in Washington County.
Yep.
With those comments, are we thumbs up forward?
With that, I'll transition back to Aaron.
So the final piece of the county's agenda is the service guiding principles, and in conversation with our new housing services department director and her new team of policy experts, there was a recommendation that we take out what is in 2023 and replace it with some modifications and some new statements that are reflective of the work that they have been doing at your guidance, but also some of the barriers we've seen placed before us because of decisions by the state to forget that we know what we're doing. So the recommendations are listed here. I don't believe in reading bullet points, but I identified at the end of them if they are modified from the current or new. So the new ones are around stabilizing folks, especially low-income residents, in their housing through investments by the state, developing new affordable apartment homes here in the region, advancing, and finally towards the bottom, the second one from the bottom, advanced system alignment that leverages local structure and expertise across funders and jurisdictions, especially in housing, homeless services, and behavioral health. This is a place where we consistently have to remind the state that we are the experts. We have the system. Stop creating parallel or new versions of what we're already doing, talk to us first. We'll tell you how to get it done. We're good at it. The rest are modifying to add in strategic conversations around equity and increasing affordability by not just creating new, but preserving what we have and those types of modifications. With that, I'm happy to answer questions about what's been proposed here or just seek a thumbs up that these are okay to insert into the 2024 agenda.
I have two questions. Given the amount of press, but also asks from the development community for local governments to subsidize private development, I was wondering, and also legislators and the governor assuming that local governments aren't doing enough to support development of housing. I was wondering what is needed to eliminate by half the single family unit development. What I mean by that is while the legislature has enabled middle housing, it's not mandated. And before we have to mandate it such that no single family housing is developed, how do we ask the legislators what they can do to accelerate the movement towards that implementation of middle housing?
I'm going to half dodge this question, but for a reason. There is a separate housing framework that the housing and LUT and community development departments and myself are working on putting together for your reconsideration in January. And I would like to punt that question to that.
That's fine, but I wanted to raise it now.
I appreciate that. So
Yeah.
that's me half dodging, but saying
Yeah,
I think we
that's
can
fine.
have that conversation.
No, you caught the ball and it'll pertain to the future. Plan for a plan works for me. Then also, on home ownership, I'm reminded, given that rents are astronomical, way back when, 40 years ago, when I was a fine young 23-year-old, I purchased a garden style condo, a brand new apartment building built as condos. And my peers could either swing townhomes or they were buying apartment complexes that were converted to condos. So mine was brand spanking new, theirs was pre-existing. And I know we have a lot of problems here in the state for 10-year liability and whatnot, but I don't know that we're that different from other places. Maybe we are a more litigious state compared to other places, but I'm just wondering if that's another idea to put on the table rather than all of our younger people throwing rent down the drain to do what I did. And 4 years later, I had quite a little asset pool there. So anyway, once again, just an idea for catching and considering down the
caught and will be considered down the road.
Yep.
With that, are we thumbs up on these proposed?
On the tenant protection policy,
Mhm.
I work with a lot of small apartment complex owners. That's very sensitive to them and very, very difficult. It's not like you have big complexes that can afford lots of people who don't pay and are difficult to get rid of it, and they do lots of bad things to your property. What are we talking about there?
Which one?
And the second bullet says stabilize low-income residents through tenant protection policies and rent assistance with sustained resources to meet ongoing needs. In the conversations I've had with the housing department, one of the things that has been put in place is for those who have rent assistance programs. There's been a pot of money that the state funds for protecting the landlords if they have concerns about renting to individuals to cover the potential damages. And that has been woefully underfunded, but also looking to make sure that the tenant protection policies that the state sets are accessible to individuals. It's complex, it's difficult. It usually requires the Oregon Law Center to get involved.
We're not suggesting eviction policy changes and that sort of thing.
I think we would have to, I think that's a question for the board to make sure that we haven't gone too far over our ski tips in stating that if there's,
I mean,
if there's something related.
You got 4 to approve it. That's the only one that I have a problem with is that protection policy, because I don't know what you mean.
Okay. I will work with the housing department to get more clarity
Okay.
for you and share that with the whole board. What those protection policies that are not sufficiently working to protect the folks we are placing into housing.
Because what I heard you describe sounded more like taking what is existing and making it more accessible
Better.
to the low-income residents. And we know through our eviction rent protection programs here that, I mean, the number of people who are dealing with eviction notices, we're in the hockey stick mode. So how we soften that would be great.
Okay. We will provide more information back to the whole board. With that approval, that ends the county state agenda, and I will turn it back to Tracy to talk clean water services.
Great, thank you, Erin. The guiding principle that's shown here on the slide is not changed from 2023. So this is just a reminder of our state legislative guiding principle. Next slide, please. Okay, so all of the items that are included on this slide as proposed state legislative priorities were included in the 2023 legislative agenda. There was some rewording on the first priority item to better reflect the range of water-related infrastructure types where we would advocate for either continued or additional funding. In addition, the third item on the slide was revised to reflect the success that we had last legislative session with passage of the reuse bill. So that language now reflects that we'll be moving into an implementation time, and that we will be working and coordinating with key stakeholders and Department of Environmental Quality as we work through that implementation. So we have one more additional slide, but I think I'll pause here to see if there's any feedback or questions or a thumbs up.
I have a question on the second one again, where it says support industrial expansion opportunities. I know that's part of probably the strategic plan of the state, but CHIPS Act. It's not all industrial. There's a lot of commercial development that's really, really good. It may not be industrial. So are we supporting investments in infrastructure that would support more than just industrial? Is that all it can be? Or can we support out?
Yeah, I would say we could probably change that to economic development expansion opportunities if that was
that was the word I would love to use, economic development words, because it seems that's what we're talking about. I mean,
Yeah, but sometimes economic development, we've been talking about how there is workforce housing problems, and you can get that with office workers as well, right? Without having commercial development. So I think you'd be better off to say support commercial and industrial expansion opportunities.
I'd be happy with that because I think it's broader than just industrial.
And I think that and that really grows from the joint task force on semiconductors last year, where we were really playing on that industrial expansion piece. So we could expand that same.
I would love that.
So thumbs up on that page?
Yep.
Okay, great. Next page.
Next page. Okay, these first three items on the slide were all included in the 2023 legislative agenda, so nothing that is new there. The last item is a proposed new additional item for 2024, and it is intended to reflect conversations related to community development, including housing, and to ensure that requirements that are included as part of water quality permits are not interpreted to be eligible for potential waivers or exemptions as the state looks at ways, opportunities to increase housing production. So we had that conversation back in October. Certainly we have had a lot of interesting conversations around housing production where we are carefully monitoring and weighing in where we think that there's conflict potentially with Clean Water Act. So,
I had a real problem trying to figure out what this new item was about. So I think if you want people to understand it like you described it, it needs a little bit of work.
And I have a question about it as well, and I really would direct the question over here to Aaron and Zucker, and that is, it seems to me that that is not an issue just for clean water services. That if this is important on their legislative agenda, it should be on the counties because it's public health. I mean, I just want to point that out.
We can definitely make some adjustments to that language to be a bit more specific in terms of where we're talking about avoiding potential conflict with the Clean Water Act. So we wanted to keep it broad enough because, again, the housing conversation is, as you know, very expansive and one that is ever evolving and really dynamic. And so we want to make sure we're giving ourselves the flexibility to engage in that discussion and really look at where we have a role in housing production as a utility.
The word housing isn't used in this at all. So it seems like it's code for doing all kinds of things.
Okay. Yeah, we can definitely be more specific in the language to call out the housing piece of that.
Yeah.
And I'd like to understand the tie.
state, if I could finish, if the state is going to require us to do something to support, be more aggressive about the market delivery of housing in our region, then yes, by all means, they also need to remember that we can't give away the store with regard to providing for the second half of this sentence while ensuring blah, 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 blah. But that isn't what the proposed wording got at. So,
okay. Yeah, we'll make some adjustments and loop back with the board prior to next week.
Commissioner Treese, did you have
No,
anything
I
more?
agree. And I'm just saying, if this does move forward, I'd like to understand the tie between the county and public health within the county to this.
We can leave that to Aaron.
Well, what the prior answer was is why does public health show up in a clean water services? That's the whole point of water resource and recovery is public health. So that's why public health is listed.
I understand why it's listed. I'm
Just trying to make a direct tie back
Yeah.
to us as well.
It's
So
to
both of
the-
us advocating.
So
for-
what is the state going to do on the housing front that's going to affect Washington County public health? That's
a question.
Yeah.
what you're getting at.
We'll make that, we'll have a conversation with Clean Water Services and HHS and make sure that that connection is clear and share that information back out to the board. Thank you.
And now I'm okay with
So
it.
now,
Mhm.
with that intention to change that new item, do I have 5 thumbs up for?
Yep.
All right, good job, Tracy.
Great. Thank you.
So next steps, remind you of where we're going. So this is, our intention is to come back for your last meeting of the year during the board meeting itself with finalized draft agendas for your approval, which will then become final agendas. That is an action item that will take place on in that board meeting. And then we will share it out to the delegation as quickly as we can, both federal and state, so that they know what it is we've prioritized. And then, although I didn't put it on here, it is implied throughout, your team will work on the agenda. Then the reminder here is that legislative days are scheduled for the 10th through the 12th. So that's the first time we'll have a real sense of which committees are talking about what they're going to do. We tentatively have thought about doing a work session on the 30th. We are still working with the clerk and leadership to figure out what the January schedule looks like so that we're coming back to you to come back at a work session to recap what has happened in the 2024 session on March 19th. All of that, of course, will be subject to the needs of the agenda. But just as a reminder, those green boxes are legislative session. That's it. That's all they get. They got to stop talking after that. The red boxes are deadlines. So you can see the first week of session is when they have to get everything ready and they have to schedule their first work session in the first chamber. Second chamber deadline is a week after that. It moves really fast. And then they have to get through everything no later than March 10th. And then the filing day for the elections is on the 12th. I think I can read numbers. This is very tiny. With that, we thank you for going through this quickly with us.
Can I ask a question?
Absolutely.
Can we go back to slide 17?
Well, you almost made it, Aaron.
I-
1 minute. Oh,
We're fine.
almost.
We'll answer quickly.
Slide 17.
The next steps, the calendar.
Does anybody else want to say something before I ask my question? Okay. So I have a topic that I think we should be discussing and exploring before the 25 session, but I can't tell when in 24 we get to start talking about that. So I don't know if March 19th is going to be the place, because I have real concerns if the can gets kicked down the road because of rolling agenda problems, and then we're months late. Because there are then deadlines for interim committee work, blah, blah, blah.
Chair, we've been talking about this as a team because we have traditionally waited until this time of year to set up our agenda for the following session, which is very kind of a little bit late in the process, to be quite frank, and we want to start having that conversation earlier. We'll look at the rolling calendar and see if there's more time in March, or if we just use the time that we've already set aside on the 19th to start having conversations with your board about 2025, because it's never too soon to start that conversation. I will also work to talk to you offline about what it is you'd like to have, so that way we can come in with preparation for all of you to know what it is we're talking about. But we will check in regularly in anticipation of a 2025 session that needs information coming out of us starting after the summer, and all of that.
Works for me.
Okay.
Any
right.
other questions or
Anything
comments? Nope. Great.
Thank you very
Terrific.
much.
Thank you for saving us some time.
Well, we took back the time we had.
So we are going to take a 15-minute break, and then we will reconvene for the remaining 2 topics on our agenda for work session. Thank you. Stay healthy, you two. Thanks for not sharing your germs. Bye-bye.
Chair Harrington. Thank you, commissioners.
She's being put through her paces.
I didn't know that.
There you go. Isn't that him? Right.
Yeah.
And right there.
Okay,
All right, we're ready to go.
thank you, Angie. All righty. We're moving on now with our American Rescue Plan Act progress update. Welcome.
Great. Thank you so much, Chair Harrington, Board of County Commissioners. Perfect. Good evening. For the record, my name is Dorian Russell, they, them. I am the American Rescue Plan Act, or ARPA, Program Manager for Washington County, and I'm very glad to be here this evening to provide you a progress update on the framework that you adopted in May. Oh, we'll see if I have permission. There we go. The purpose of today's meeting, this is an informational item. I wanted to provide the opportunity to review programmatic progress in your adopted ARPA framework with a focus on outcomes across the entire portfolio. You may recall in May, you adopted your 2023 through 2026 ARPA framework. Since that time, we have been working very diligently in the completion and closeout of those discontinued projects from the first framework. We have now created all of the infrastructure for federal reporting. So the new projects that you adopted now officially exist to the federal government. Our next update, we've gone through 1 quarter of data with the federal government in that respect, and we'll have our next update at the end of January. I'll note that we have been diligently working to quickly obligate funds as fast as possible, with a reminder that we have that December 2024 deadline from the U.S. Treasury to obligate all of our funding. As we were working to close out the old framework, I would like to elevate that we have completed the 2023 annual report, but you could consider this a retrospective of the pandemic response and recovery activities over the last 3 years. And as a reminder, this new framework really pushes us towards resilience as a theme. A quick refresher on the current investment areas. I will note that there is a supplemental worksheet as well in the board packet that summarizes these. We're going to go through in this presentation some of the status updates and outcomes in each of these areas. Starting with workforce development, here's a quick data snapshot of all of the incredible things that are coming out of this program. For example, we've had over 250 workers enrolled in sectoral job training programs. I'll also highlight that 48 childcare providers have access to training. To dive a little bit deeper, one of the areas that is getting off the ground is our West Side Works program as well. This program is exciting as it's matching students in the PCC early childhood education programs in Beaverton and beyond. We're expanding. And provides these student workers wages as preschool aides, preschool floaters, and similar positions. And when completing the program, they not only receive a program completion bonus, but each of these employers has the option to consider these students for permanent employment. For your small business investment area, I'd like to elevate that over 650 small businesses have participated in ARPA-funded workshops and classes. You'll also see that over 500 small businesses have received one-on-one coaching support. I'd like to let a success story speak for itself, let some of the data speak for itself as well with this example with our partners at Adelante. And if I could get some support in playing the video.
Casa Cuy es un incubador de negocios. Entonces, la tienda física se llama Casa Cuy y está ubicada en el nivel 1 del edificio de Adelante Mujeres. El propósito es apoyar a nuevos empresarios a crecer sus negocios y a obtener educación financiera y de manejo de negocios pequeños.
Washington County has had a long-standing relationship with Adelante Mujeres, and we recognize that Adelante Mujeres as an organization really knows the community that they work with in Forest Grove, the small businesses and entrepreneurs around Forest Grove, specifically the Latin community. And we saw the Equitable Economic Recovery Grant Program as an opportunity to provide further capacity for them at this time to service that community through their incredible programming, which includes Casa Cui, the Business Incubator Program.
Bueno, gracias al condado, nosotros recibimos fondos para la creación del programa. Entonces, ahorita estamos activos y hemos apoyado cerca de 6 negocios. Sí, efectivamente, tenemos actualmente 2 negocios. Uno es Mona Creative Studio. Su propietaria, Mónica Catalán, es una mujer muy emprendedora, la cual da como servicios a clases de arte a niños pequeños o adultos. También está activa dentro de programas de Adelante Mujeres. Entonces su negocio está creciendo y ella ha mostrado muchísimas herramientas de liderazgo.
I started my business in 2019 when COVID hits. Casa Cui has helped me a lot by exposing what I do, putting my name out here in my own town, trying to promote my services. It's also helping me by educating me or training me in how to develop my own business. It really amazed me. This organization is really, really authentic and helps a lot of people.
Otra de nuestras vendedoras estrellas es Isabel Hernández, entonces ella es dueña de La Tóxica Boutique. Ella, por medio de sus productos, transmite cultura. Siempre ha comentado que no le gustaría que se pierdan las tradiciones y la cultura de donde es originaria, que es de Michoacán, México.
They are helping us a lot to grow, to have more customers, learning new stuff. How to manage my small business. Plus, they're giving us a chance to be in this building so we can show our product to the public.
Through our partnership with Adelante Mujeres, supporting the Casa Cui Business Incubator Program, we really see the opportunity to support entrepreneurs and small businesses at this time in recovery with comprehensive services to support them as they grow and achieve their vision in the long term.
Fantastic. And congratulations and kudos to our partners at Adelante and for the staff in the Economic Development Office for that program and many other successes. Moving on, your investment area in broadband, the update that we have here is that we've hired a broadband investment coordinator to implement the recently completed countywide broadband investment strategy, and that is focused on addressing digital equity. For your strategic planning investment area, progress to date, we've hired a consultant team from Marina & Company to co-develop the countywide services inventory and service level assessment. I know that every department director listening in is well aware of the progress there. For your investments in congregate care facilities, these HVAC investments, we are working as quickly as we can to finalize solicitations and contracts for 3 of the HVAC projects. And I'm happy to share that the 4th in Harkins House is currently in the construction phase. As for public health, we are continuing to meet public health requirements at the minimum compliance level related to COVID-19. I will note here that we have continued public health responsibilities and we have not seen a decrease in mandated work since I was last in front of your board. For revenue replacement, our investments in organizational resilience, teams are in the process of vetting proposals for the ERP and reviewing product demonstrations now as we speak to complete the request for proposal process and near completion on a contract. In terms of ARPA management, we're continuing to meet the U.S. Treasury's reporting requirements. Our team is providing technical support in the design, the implementation, communication, and compliance needs across the entirety of the ARPA portfolio. And finally, looking ahead beyond this informational update, we have 1 quarter of federal reporting past us for your newly adopted framework. We're working as quickly as we can to obligate funds. A refresher, we need to have everything contractually obligated by December 2024, and we will be spending out all of our funds by December 2026. The next time I'll be in front of you will be early 2024, likely February, with an obligation and expenditure update, as well as some policy options on your ARPA next steps. So looking forward to an additional update in the new year. And with that, I would be very happy to answer any questions that y'all might have. Thank you.
Commissioners, any questions or comments? Who would like to go first? Or if you don't have any, just let me know.
Any wild possibility that we won't obligate everything by the end of the month? Obligate any funds? Is there any possibility that we won't obligate everything by the end of the month?
Oh, I think every local government in the country that has received ARPA funds is asking them the same question. I'm confident on the current trajectory that we'll have many touch points with your board in the future if concerns arise about obligating.
Obligated by December of next year.
I thought it was
No, not this year.
23. I'm trying.
Oh my goodness, no, not this
Oh, yeah,
month.
yeah,
Yes.
No, but there is, I should have said
You've
that.
got 12 and a half months.
No, right. Any possibility we will not have it obligated. I should- Yeah.
If we believe that that is even remotely a possibility, we will be in front
here
of your board
immediately.
again saying, here's plan B, C, D, E, Z.
All right.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
Yeah, Chair Hunter, I have a quick question. Great presentation, Dorian. I have the first framework is closed. So what's the spending status?
The overall spending status for the portfolio?
Yeah.
Quick snapshot, just based on our last quarter's data, we have obligated about a little over half of all of our ARPA funds, and we've expended over a third. I would be happy to provide an in-depth update after our next quarter's pull of data. So that's a little bit expired. But I plan to come in front of your board with those January numbers that we'll be providing to the federal government.
Okay, I can wait.
And I would also add too, just to add a little bit of context, our team is keeping tabs on other local governments nationally and looking at spending trends, both expenditure and obligations. And we're so far not concerned. We're not an outlier amongst other governments yet.
Thank you. Commissioner Treese?
I'm good. Thank you.
Okay. Commissioner Willie?
No, I'll wait for the January report because I like numbers.
Okay. I have a few questions. So on the workforce development outcomes and the small business outcomes, I'm pleased to see them. But my question is, are these cumulative data results from all of ARPA, or is this specific to the 23-26 framework?
For the data snapshot on the workforce slide, those are cumulative.
Similarly with small biz?
Yes, I believe so.
Okay, not a problem. On the congregate care facilities, I must have missed the letting of that contract on a consent agenda or something, because I thought the only contract that was out so far on those criticals was the jail.
I'd be happy to confirm with Laurel Brown, but my understanding is the HVAC system for Harkins House is already in the construction phase, so that would have come to.
We can check on that and get right back to you.
Okay.
I just
Yeah.
don't know what I missed.
Yeah, I'm not
So,
sure.
yeah,
Thank you.
Okay. The other three haven't come yet.
I thought the jail, because we approved GC contract for the jail.
Were they together? That's my question.
Well, maybe. I know, I remember we did that. So that'll be fine. Then on public health, other than handling outbreaks at congregate living facilities, what else does public health have to do for minimum compliance level?
Thanks for asking. And I would be very happy to also invite Dr. Marie Bowman Davis to respond to this question more in depth at a later date. This includes, we consider COVID-19 much like any other type of investigatable disease at this point. That includes outbreak investigations. We have requirements related to providing access to vaccines. It does include disease outbreaks, as you mentioned. So for example, if the state says if you have 5 cases in a daycare, you're required to do an investigation. Well, that would be the type of activities that would be happening under investigation for COVID, just like we would do if there were other types of communicable diseases. It's becoming more akin to the phrase that your board is more familiar with now, with living among COVID-19. It's not something that is necessarily going away, but much like other communicable diseases, we continue to respond in that way. And with where we are now, with new boosters becoming available this fall, with variants of concern and it being a relatively high transmission season, I don't anticipate seeing any reductions in our mandate levels this season, at least. But I would defer to experts in public health to advise further out, as I don't have a crystal ball.
So I would just say, Ms. Calvert, that we know what we approved, and I appreciate seeing outcome results, but that can be sent to us in an email. I saw the video through the social media posts from the county previously. What I want to make sure is that money isn't just burning a hole in people's pocket, but is doing the work that we approved it to do. But given the cadence of work, I don't think we need to be working on reallocation on a monthly basis. Rather, keep going, do what was directed, and then come back to us in July, like we've talked about, after that full year of the 23-26, with the data for us to do reallocation as appropriate for obligation to be successful with that end of the year obligation requirement.
And when you say, just clarification here, when you say reallocation, you're talking about if there's any underspend in areas?
Yeah,
Yeah,
we only
not
have
reallocation of what's obligated.
right.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Just want to
So
clarify that.
I think the updates, a quarterly update, can be delivered much more effectively, given the cadence of work that we have before us, and that I imagine, based upon last year's experience, will continue to come before us. Does that sound reasonable to the
Does to
board?
me.
Me.
Well, and I just want to make a point here that it sounds reasonable to me because the ARPA team has done a great job in managing this process and closely managing it. And I say kudos to Commissioner Willie and to the chair, but to the staff, and Dorian, to you, for making sure that these buckets are filled and that we're monitoring them along the way. I wouldn't be comfortable in July if that hadn't happened. So
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah, which, a lot of work has gone into all these programs, and our team, as we have opportunities to be out in the community and talking about for example, the work of our economic development team, you supply us with the talking points that reflect these investments. And so even though you're not spending work session time telling us about those things, your other communication means are working very well. So keep up the good work, pedal to the metal through the end of our fiscal year, so that we can make, if there's a need to make any adjustments, to make sure we're successful with that obligation goal by the end of the year 2024. I don't want it to go by so fast. That we're well positioned so that we can do the spending by the end of 26.
That's great feedback. Thank you, Chair Harrington and Commissioner,
Yeah.
or the team.
Great.
Thank you.
Is your vote?
Any problems we should be aware of?
Not yet.
Okay. Awesome.
The answer is just no.
No.
Don't say
Yeah.
it yet. Don't want to hear that yet.
Terrific.
Good job.
Great. Thank you very much. Okay, we are now on to board and leadership communication. Who would like to go first?
Gonna call mine up.
Yeah, I think I got mine right here, so I'm gonna go,
You go first.
I am gonna go.
Ready? I'm not ready, so
Well, mine should be relatively short since I just returned from vacation last Friday, but it isn't. Um, Yesterday, the three of us went to the Family Promise of Tualatin Valley Tiger Shelter. And what a phenomenal project that is. Still work to be done, but that is just really great. It's going to certainly impact, what was it, 77 rooms that they have available, and not that many families, but because there's
some are
some
individuals,
are in,
some
yeah.
are families.
Right.
Yeah, they've been very creative about how they repurpose the former hotel rooms to
Very cool.
accommodate various family sizes from individual all the way to a family of 11. So
Yeah. So yeah, that's very cool.
we even got to go in their playroom.
Well, what I was most impressed about was the clothing
Mhm.
inventory that they've been able to not only acquire, but
Organized.
And
Very
so,
well organized.
um,
We're organized at a store.
so I know where my grandson's castaways are going to be going here over the next while, because that was very cool. So anyway, tomorrow I'm meeting with Bank City Councilor Marcia Kirk about a variety of subjects. I have a Salmonberry Trail meeting with the executive director. I have a GPI mixer. And then the Governor's Trust Counties meetings that I have been having on Friday. This one has been moved to Thursday, 3 o'clock in Salem. So I will be leaving here at 1:30 during our roundtable to make that meeting on there from until 5 o'clock. And then I think we have a follow-up meeting after that. So that'll be a little bit later. And on Friday is the Forest Trust Lands meeting. And Chair, I didn't know if you were going to attend that meeting or not. I'm going to do it Zoom. But I
That's
didn't know
the
if you were
most
gonna
I
do
would
it.
do.
Yeah.
But I think I have something that conflicts with it.
Yeah, I think it's 10
yeah.
to 12.
It's the Safe
yeah, the
Rest
Safe-
Village.
Yeah, Safe Rest Village tour. Yes, I won't be going on that. I will be at the Forest Trust Lands. We have just today, I received the latest modeling numbers, and they are not good. They're really bad for Washington County. So I have a meeting tomorrow with Aaron and Brandon, and to go over that. It's a 53-page report or something like that. So we're trying to process that. Sure, I'm having against my general rule is I'm having that printed. If you'd like to have one at the same time, we'll do 2 of them. And it's
Why
not
don't-
like you need some reading material, but
Well, why don't we do 2? Because if I don't need it, GR may need it to reference too.
Aaron and I were just talking at the break on that. So yeah. Yeah, you've got the report in your inbox. It's just this to be a hard copy one. So.
Yeah, I'm not going to need a full hard copy, but I wonder if we're going to possibly need to reference it, a year from now. That's why sometimes if you have it on a bookshelf, it's easier than trying to remember where did I file it, blah, blah, blah. That's all. So
Yeah. So okay.
I don't think I'm a little skeptical about this ending so soon and smoothly.
Smoothly is yeah, that would be.
It's a rough ride.
So that's all I got.
Well, but thank you for diving into all those details. Ooh, sorry to hear the current tract. So
I'll go next.
Great.
I have to jump around a little bit here. This past week, I attended Sheriff Caprice Massey's swearing in. That was many of us did. It was wonderful, and I think it's historic here that we have our first female sheriff. But it's also historic that the sheriffs from our tri-county area are all female. And that's really a remarkable situation. So it's exciting. I attended the Waste-Free Policy Task Force kickoff meeting as a clone. Tom, there were two meetings. There were two meetings at Metro at the same time, and my appreciation goes out to Stephen Roberts and to Tom Eggleston for helping me both through the West Side Multimodal Improvement Study meeting and the Waste Fee Policy Task Force. So, but that's
Tom your clone, or was
they
that
both
Vega?
are. Actually, I think I'm their clone, but anyway, but it was very helpful, and Maida helped a great deal as well. So that was the kickoff meeting. I have a follow-up meeting with Tom to really dive in, and I've got upcoming meetings to address these policy questions that we're identifying. The West Side Multimodal Improvement Study meeting was kind of the big one for us and for the conclusion. We're trying to get to a conclusion here, and I asked Stephen to kind of help me build out, and I'm going to read this to you. There was consensus recommendation that didn't involve additional group discussion on transportation demand management programs that's encouraging trips that do not rely on single occupancy vehicles, improving transit, particularly frequent and high capacity transit service, shuttles and circulator services to supplement TriMet services, small park and rides, completing gaps in the bicycle and pedestrian network on streets in the corridor, completing planned vehicle capacity improvements on streets in the corridor, and parking pricing. That's where everyone said, yep, green card, we're ready to go. There was qualified support after a fair amount of group discussion around improvements to the Burnside corridor within Washington County, not into Multnomah County, just in Washington County. Additional, and that's particularly important if we eventually look at tolling down the road from a diversion standpoint. Additional potential high frequency or high capacity transit service beyond what's already in the TriMet service plans. The big one is that the one thing that moved the needle in the analysis was tolling. And that was tolling on Highway 26 and 217. And that's building on the work that's being done in the regional mobility pricing work. So tolling could be potentially combined with those improvements. The US 26 and I-405 corridor bottleneck improvements, they build on the improvements identified in the prior congestion and bottleneck studies that were done by ODOT. The Cornelius Pass roadway improvements between 26 and 30 would be focused on safety improvements, and there's other potential off-highway transportation improvements under that further study of potential tolling. So the message here is the consensus around future study for tolling, not tolling, but future study around it. And I think that's a really important, obviously, delineation. There was significant concern about future improvement concepts around the northern connector, and this is the tunnel from Cornelius Pass to Germantown to Highway 30, and then also the North Willamette Bridge, that bridge that would connect Germantown, US 30 vicinity across to the Rivergate port terminal area. This is a regional group, and where we're talking about regional issues, there was a strong contingent that was in support of this. The Hillsborough contingent included in that. But my real discomfort in the meeting was that I didn't feel that the region was listening to what Hillsborough was trying to say. And in that setting, that's our responsibility. So I pushed pretty hard on just listen. Let's just listen to each other here, because there's kind of a lot of, no, there's no way that's going to work. No, it's like, well, let's just talk a little bit more before we just say no. So
no discounting, but rather actually listening.
Exactly. Thank you. That's a very good way to put it. So that was the extent of where we are now. We have another meeting scheduled to kind of go over some of the adjustments, and then we'll hopefully be done in December. So that's
This month.
yep, that's the goal. So that is the goal. So let's see. I had an MPAC coordinating meeting. I'm going in as chair of MPAC in January, so I'm meeting with Metro to kind of understand what all the processes are. We're looking at alternating. It's going to be a big year for MPAC in relationship to the UGB work. So we're looking at balancing between remote and in person, and maybe every other month. Not everyone's happy with that, but when you're dealing with big issues, I feel it's really important to be able to see each other and to be able to communicate across the table. So the ACRE meeting was last night, and that went well. The focus there was on the county strategic plan update. Danny did a great job in that discussion. And we also worked on a piece that kind of the agreements of how we operate as a council together in terms of, listen to understand, those types of things. And it was good work. Friday, I'm going to the Safe Rest Pods reopening, and I have Friday afternoon, the government relations ARPA second round interviews. So that's my week. Sorry.
That's a new position. Yeah. Sorry, I was trying to remind myself. Ooh, little slow on the uptake there, Catherine. Who would like to go next? Or are we doing this side of the
Just doing
table?
this
and then we're
side.
doing that?
We'll do the loop.
Yeah. Is that okay with you, Commissioner Rogers?
That's great.
You can decide if you go fourth or fifth. How's that?
Oh,
Yes.
Okay.
I will go third. And yes, I was there with Sheriff Massey's ceremony. It was a full room of people, a lot of people there. So it was great really to see the celebration and to see a lot of the sheriff's office leadership team there. Yesterday, one thing that I want to elevate for you all and also give my kudos to the staff is yesterday we had WCCC's at their first retreat yesterday. It was a half a day. So thank you, Stephen Robertson, the entire team who spent a lot of time, especially tracking a lot of historical documents to do WCCC 101 presentation to sort of talk about the inceptions of WCCC and how it came about. So thank you, Stephen. You did a great job of really setting the stage and bringing everyone along the journey of where we are. I learned a lot. I had a lot of aha moments, and especially the role of the board for when it comes to WCCC and also like there's an opportunity to build trust as well. and I also learned a lot of documents that I didn't know existed, such as a resolution in order. So thank you, Courtney, and thank you to the staff who tracked those documents down, and a lot of the WCCC bylaws that weren't purview. I wasn't purview to it. So I appreciate all the tracking that went into.
I think it's safe to say if it's not on the WCCC webpage, we don't have access.
Yeah.
Yep.
But it is now, and hopefully it will be specifically called out, especially the two resolution in order, the one in 1982 and the one in 1986. And then also, I think the aha moment I had in terms of the board role was assuming the autonomy of the body of the committee, translating that there's no role for the board. So I think that was a good clarification on my part, and we'll continue the conversation on that end. And then the other thing that happened is we took a survey of the MISTIP projects and had the opportunity to vote for all of you, including Chair Harrington, who represents the entire county, and picked 3 projects for each district. And
you didn't vote for us. You represented.
Yeah. And
as
it-
our liaison. to
Yes.
WCC.
Yeah, not a vote. Using wrong terminology. You're like, I didn't give a proxy, and there's no proxy allowed in WCC. Yes, I filled out a survey that pick your top 3 projects for each, and it was a really robust discussion. Everybody was going around and really, really thinking hard of the projects that they should fill out in the survey. So there's a lot of energy and time invested into filling that survey. So I followed the data on each district. Yeah. And with that concludes my update.
Great. So I'll go next. So we had the SHS Oversight Committee meeting yesterday. Between the SHS Oversight Committee meeting and the SHS TCPB meeting, I spend anywhere from 5.5 to 6.5 hours a month just on supportive housing services. So
Thank you.
You're welcome. On the oversight committee, we went over the Multnomah County Corrective Action Plan. I think their the dashboard summary could use a little bit of work because there's actually more progress than the way they use colors. I don't know about you, but if you use yellow on something, that's a caution flag to me versus reporting that it's underway and proceeding.
It's on its way to red.
Yeah, really. I've been having informal meetings with various Washington County state legislators. This is following up on the state shared services diagram. So they've all expressed interest. Those that have day jobs or are sensitive to their colleagues who have regular paid jobs, since it's a citizen legislature. When it comes to our forum, they've been sharing that an evening one would work better than a morning one. And I've been catching up on constituent meetings with all the travel I had to do for my family situation. I got a little bit behind on that, so that's been a lot of fun. I also had the opportunity to speak before the Beaverton Business Advocacy Council of the Beaverton Chamber, and that was fun too, just talking about what we do and what are some of the major things on our plate. So I also had a conversation with Metro and the Tri-County chairs on how SHS is going and how there's a lot more need for affordable housing support than we have bond capacity for. And it's always useful to remind ourselves that the affordable housing bond that we've achieved through Metro was defined to deal with the end cases where the federal and typical HUD funding for affordable housing doesn't deal with the extremely low income 0 to 30% or disabled, as well as large family units. And we've been doing real well there. But there is a need for continued affordable housing. And this is where that point that I raised earlier of the state thinking, oh, well, the metro region had their own affordable housing bond and now they have their supportive housing services. They don't need our help. Oh, anything but, you know. We've really pushed the edge of the envelope, and the appetite of our voters for directing funds. So some polling from different organizations is saying, you know, our voters are saying, no, you know, we're going to keep paying our tax bills for what we've already approved, but don't be bringing us additional ideas. So more work's going to continue, but we've been feeling pressure on local government and it's not going to go away. So means we have to keep telling our story everywhere we can tell it. So look at that, 44 seconds still. Take it away, Commissioner Rogers, before I run out of time.
I am surprised. Wow. There was a mistake on my calendar. I guess I didn't mention it. What is on my 11th week is this week. So I attended the WA forum yesterday. It was a group of folks who were talking about what was happening, principally in Hillsborough and Ronler Acres. And before that, they had a little ditty on past WA execs and founders of WA. And I already told Pam that she did a really nice job with her remarks. So
What was the theme of the forum?
the forum was about what's happening at Ronler Acres and what additional problems.
What did happen at Brownwood Acres?
And what might be happening.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then they also had,
But the video was the commemoration of the 25 years.
yes, that was.
It was
Oh.
a separate issue.
Yeah.
I wasn't talking about Brownwood Acre.
No, you weren't.
Just
Oh,
wanna
the
make sure
25
that's
years
clear.
of WEA.
Yes,
Oh, the
She had-
25th anniversary.
as an exec director in the past.
Yes.
The only thing that was disappointing, which I said to Elizabeth, is that I certainly give great credit to Hillsborough City of. I give great credit to the folks at Intel. I give great credit to all those in the development. But without a little bit of county assistance, meaning with Clean Water Services and all the great work you guys did out there, as well as the MISTIP program, well, that would not have happened. So it was just more holistic. Last night was at our R1 Act meeting. We had an update on the interstate bridge and all the costs, and heard a bunch of comments from a lot of different angles. And it's obvious that there's not congruence on that thought in that region. Some want to plan for the future. Others say no more expansion on that. So that presents a bit of a challenge, to say the least. On Wednesday of this week, I got work systems executive meeting. We haven't met for a bit, so it'll be nice. I wish we'd meet in person. On Thursday, some of you already know, they have a act, what they call modal chair meeting, state meeting. I'll do it right there from the same place we're all meeting for the round table. So I don't know what room.
You'll step out for that.
Well, they could put me upstairs. I guess it's no morning. I've got to make a presentation, all that sort of thing for Region 1, and then I'll be right back in. The only other thing, Pam, real quickly, because you mentioned the tolling, everything is all about how we talk about things, and those who are really pushing the initiative petition for the whole issue of tolling on 217 as well as 26 is certainly energized them, and there are energized them, and there's a lot of businesses who are very, very unhappy. And so it's how I could say that was really silly to you, and you could either take it bad or good depending on my voice. So it's just an issue that needs, I think, some conversation. It's certainly firing. One other thing, and I'll let you talk.
Is IP4, has it been submitted for signatures?
Gathering, and I know they have money. So
Could I respond quickly to that?
oh, please.
I just want to make sure that I'm really clear that it is about the results of the information that was the one piece that moved the needle, and that there was more study. The other thing that I took the opportunity, Brendan Finn was at the table.
Oh, yeah.
And I said, here, we're here right now. This information is going to get out, and this is going to make people a little, this will stir things up again. Yeah. And I think if we've learned anything, we've learned that communication in these types of arenas is absolutely imperative. And, I think I said something like, Brendan, I can see your bruises from here, but I hope that those bruises carry into a different approach into the future. So, Roy, I understand what you're saying, and I agree. I just wanted to report out what the improvement study results were.
I'm not blaming anybody, just telling you
Okay.
how it works.
But I think it's a very good point. And I didn't talk about you know, the other piece that I did mention.
I wish I would have gotten the president. I'm going too long. I apologize because we're going back and forth. There was a piece that was offered last night and about funding at the state level and the revenue and how even though it was fairly consistent and kind of moving along with buying power was decreasing. And there was a new member there. I think he's from Oklahoma County. He finally said, I've listened to all of this and I've heard about tolling. I've heard about placing. Why don't we just raise the gas tax? Because from what your numbers are showing, we could raise it a nickel and solve all of these problems that are a dime. And it was an interesting perspective, you know, that here was this young guy coming on and they were showing bonding capacity. There's one quick thing. That was the first retreat in modern time, meaning the last few years. We had a huge retreat. And what we did was to identify what was the countywide system.
2008.
Yeah, we had
7 or 8.
Yeah, we had to
6,
go.
7.
Yeah, somewhere in there.
I was there.
Were you there?
Yeah.
Yes, you did. Yeah, thank you, Kevin. And we sat there and said, let's identify. We went over and over. So it was a big retreat on that topic. And so I'm proud of you guys are doing that, just saying things kind of happen. So anyway, that's all I have. I went too long. I apologize.
It's just been a baker's dozen number of years.
Yeah, it's probably. Yeah, that's probably
That's all.
right. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Probably right.
So IP4, the title has been submitted and they're out for signatures statewide, IP4.
I don't know this out statewide. I do know who's running the campaign and I do know they're raising. And they have some committed. And I understand.
Oh, but thank you. Took me a while to find you, Aaron.
Probably knows.
Feel free to come up
probably
because I have another question that's election related.
I'll be very careful. I'm reporting facts here. According to the Oregon Secretary of State's IP4 is currently out on circulation for any petition circulators. So it is out in the field.
Getting signatures.
Gaining signatures.
Is there a title or anything?
I don't know that process well
No,
enough.
that's fine.
Yeah.
You don't have to speak to it. If it's not on your page from the Secretary of State.
There is a draft title that's listed in the system, but it was not finalized.
That's fine. That's fine.
I can read the internet apparently.
Which reminded me, since you got me thinking about signature petitions, mentioning IP4. When I was talking to the Beaverton Chamber Business Advocacy Council, that one of the questions they inquired about was a potential Washington County preschool for all. And I referred back, let me finish. I referred back to that committee work that you and I participated in and how they had a proposal and we kept this board informed, but we told them that there were 2 major pieces missing. One was the business case for why businesses would be interested in this. And secondly, that Washington County, their proposal would be asking the county to administer all of this. And we didn't even have the capacity to take a look at what that would possibly involve before they went to the ballot. And the last we left it, they said, well, we said we wouldn't sponsor it. And they said that they would go through the signature work. To the best of my knowledge, the Washington County Elections Office has not been presented with a request for a ballot title for a signature petition. So I just wanted to report, I'm not asking you.
Just listening.
A question. Rather, I just wanted to highlight that question came up. We on the board have discussed sensitivity around income tax measures and business income tax measures. So what we've experienced is when the county elections office, when someone goes to file a petition, the elections office usually lets us know. And so I'm just relying upon that as our normal course of operations. So I'm not asking any new questions, just highlighting that as far as I know, if such a thing such work is done by our elections office, we're relying upon our team to let us know, just like they have in the past.
Thank you.
Okay. All righty. Leadership communication. Thank you for being so patient with us.
Yeah, thank you. Good afternoon, Chair Harrington and Commissioners. I have a couple things for you today. A few of you have mentioned the first item, which is just the Hillsborough Safe Rest Village grand reopening on Friday. Many of you are attending. So you're aware of that. It is a grand reopening of the Hillsborough Safe Rest Village Pod on December 8th, to which you're all invited. The previous Pod Village, as you also know, was moved from the new Cornelia site over the summer back to Hillsborough, invited them back in at a temporary basis while work was done. This reopening will expand the shelter capacity with an additional 30 shelter pods, and we'll use our new pallet homes. It'll be our first shelter project opening with the funds through the governor's executive orders on unsheltered homelessness. And then the next site will happen in late January, early February in Aloha. And then other good news about permanent shelter projects in Hillsborough. We're back on track to break ground next fall, thanks to additional funding from the Supportive Housing Services Fund. And that site will eventually become a permanent shelter campus with on-site services to serve between 60 and 70 people every night.
Where is that one?
Come on that in Hillsborough, I believe. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes. And the next thing I have, I was going to ask JT and Carolina to come up to the table if you might. We have a couple of announcements from the Office of Sustainability. We're thrilled to share that after a nationwide search, James or JT Douglas was appointed as the new Sustainability Program Manager. JT started November 13th, so welcome to the county. He spent the last 9 years of his career working in environmental science and sustainability. And most recently, he served at the city of Denton, Texas, where he completed several greenhouse gas inventories and helped to lead the city's first climate action and adaptation plan. JT has a master's degree in environmental science and resource management from Montana State University, where he worked as part of a geoscience laboratory, publishing research on environmental analysis and carbon sequestration. I might need to look that word up. I also want to take this time to thank Carolina Martins and congratulate her for her recent promotion to Sustainability Coordinator. And since the departure of Eric Lopret from the Sustainability program earlier this year, she's been working solo. She's holding the Sustainability program together and being kind of an interim everything. And so we're super proud of her and excited for her promotion as well.
For holding the ship down, as the expression goes.
Yes. And JT, if you have, I don't know if you have anything you want to say.
Are you new to Oregon?
I am new
Yeah.
to Oregon. Yes.
Welcome.
Thank you so much.
Welcome to our atmospheric rivers.
It's fantastic.
Fantastic.
It is.
It's not white and it's not cold.
That's right. No, I'll just say it's a pleasure to meet all of you and to be working here with this organization. Everybody that I've met has been incredibly kind and just a great group of dedicated public servants. I'm very excited to be here. And I just want to echo my thanks to Carolina as well. She's been incredibly helpful with the transition, and I'm just excited to learn a lot and to be a part of this organization. So it's a pleasure meeting you.
Well, the sustainability team at Washington County has a really great reputation with the Energy Trust folks. So good work, past and present, with what you've been doing. And I also want to share that I'm really excited with the joint collaboration between the sustainability team and our public health team. We, from time to time, are pressed by constituents who doubt the science of climate change. But what we know is that our community is living with the effects of climate change through all of our seasonal challenges, right? And so we know we're living with it. It's undeniable we're living with the effects today. So this isn't just, oh, well, someday we'll figure out how to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. But no, we have to make some adaptations with what we're dealing with today to support all of our community members who may not be well suited to be under these challenges, while we also look to minimize and mitigate the effects of current and future greenhouse gas emissions. So it's a bigger tent, hopefully that way. So yeah, we're looking forward to learning more about what we have to do, whether it's policy wise or investment wise. So welcome aboard.
Thank you so much.
And good for you for having another teammate, huh?
I'm excited to have some help.
Yes, yes. Thank you very much for bearing with us through this whole transition. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great. Where, office-wise, is the sustainability team housed these days?
We are currently at the facilities building, which is right by public services. Is a building next to this one.
Oh, okay. Oh, the little one. Yes.
Yeah,
little
right in front of
one.
where you park.
Yeah, yeah. Great. Thank you.
Thank you. That concludes my staff report.
Great.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chair Harrington and board. Just real quickly, I wanted to let you know that after your board held the TEFRA hearing last week for the bond, the issuance of the bonds, the work continues behind the scenes. Jackie Sayota has been really leading the effort on making sure we have, together with finance and with the support of your board, our outside counsel, to make sure we have the multitude of documents that are required to get that to the finish line done. And we're very, very close, racing downhill towards Friday for getting all the closing documents and all the supporting documents done. So truly in such a complex transaction, it feels like things are going really smoothly, and that's a testament to the team. So the only other thing I want to report is Brad is back on Thursday, so you will be seeing him. Thank you for your patience and allowing me to sit in. I've learned a lot.
Well, you know, you could elbow him out of the way. Brad, just take Thursday and catch up and I'll cover the
No,
round.
he's ready. I'm ready for him to.
Yeah, I was gonna say, you're right, right.
Interim, everything felt really, really relevant, and I'm ready for him to be back. He's not getting easy. We're bringing him right back in. So, but yeah, I'm glad he got it. Yes. I'm glad he got a good break. I was telling Commissioner Willie he's back on U.S. soil. He was in Miami yesterday. I did take a call from him, but still not very many emails. So I'm glad he's taking his last few days, because we will have needs for him the minute he hits.
Oh yeah, through the end of the year. It's like major sprint. Yeah. I know. It's one thing I am worried about my January vacation coinciding with potential government shutdowns and ramp downs and whatnot. So hey, maybe I'll just have to extend my OO status another day or two or whatever.
You might like that.
Well, no, I've had trips interrupted by revolutions before, so I would rather not go through that
Like the
experience.
pandemic?
again. No.
Actual revolution.
Actual
revolution?
Actual revolution. Yes. So no, I take all of that kidding aside. Don't want to do that again. So,
But that's it for me.
well, thank you for serving us well. Mr. Jockers, Clean Water Services. So I guess you learned an awful lot about our other topics of the day.
I did. It was very interesting. And I'm glad we were here certainly for the legislative piece as well and the ARPA report. Thank you very much, Chair Harrington, members, Clean Water Services Board. It is an atmospheric river, as you said, right? I was interesting. I looked at my thermometer in my house yesterday. It was 61 degrees at 10 o'clock last night. It is also the Pineapple Express. This is game day for a lot of our folks at work. It is a very, very busy time. We spent the end of last week and into some of Saturday doing something called storm patrol. We go to high priority areas that we know that may flood to make sure that things are cleared out. Pieces like that. We had crews on standby over the weekend. We only had one call out. A lot of the calls we get are still that end of that. There's leaves over the catch basin, which we have a lot of people in the community that know how to go out and do that and take care of it, but sometimes it gets a little too much. Certainly the wastewater collection and treatment system is all running according to as it should. We're kind of in a unique circumstance right now because luckily the ground is not saturated yet. We're also seeing a great deal of rain, but we're seeing these breaks. So there's a lot of rain and then there's some time for things to drain off, and a lot of rain and times for things to drain off. hopefully that will continue in tomorrow. This storm in February would probably express itself differently.
That's where
Probably
the
see-
infiltration word comes
Yeah,
into play?
inflow and infiltration, but that's more in the sanitary sewer side. That's more in the pipes. This is where the ground just gets saturated. There isn't any capacity for streams to absorb or the ground to absorb any more water. So when we get this level of rain later in the year, we see more flooding problems. We did get a few calls in some of the places you've heard about before, places like Tropicana, right? That just don't have the stormwater infrastructure, but fortunately the rain would slow down and it would start to drain again. So we've gotten a little bit lucky there, but we do have crews on standby around the clock right now to respond to any.
So I still don't understand infiltration then, so I've got to do some more work.
We could take you, we took Representative Bonamici out and had her to look at all the pipes and learn about inflow and infiltration. We'd be happy to do that with you too, with our television crew.
Sign me up.
Absolutely.
Shovel and dig down there.
Here's how bad it is. I was driving to work the other day and one of the Clean Water Services truck is in the left lane and I couldn't get far enough forward to look in his window and do my crazy Chair Harrington wave.
I haven't gotten any reports on it.
It's a crazy woman going by waving at us. What is that?
That's all I have, thanks.
He's in a little blue Clean Water Services themed car. All righty. Does anyone have anything else for today? No, that is it. Done for December 5th, 2023. See you next Tuesday. Well, yeah. that
Thursday.
too.